Okay right now? Are you sure? All right, how excited were you to see Dad?
It was shocking. I got to call out work this morning, and I can't believe a small town like this.
Lieutenant Governor and I have been spoken to in an attempt that we might be prepared for something like this playing itself out in our state.
I hope they and I hope the people of Newtown don't have a crash on their head later.
Prior to the Sandyhook event, Newtown, Connecticut was most famously known for a 300-acre property called Fairfield Hills. Operating from 1931 to 1995, the Fairfield Hills Hospital housed the area's mentally ill and criminally insane. Uniformly connected by underground tunnels, the 16 red brick buildings was where cruel psychiatric experiments took place involving electric shock therapy, hydrotherapy, and frontal lobotomies. Mysterious deaths and suicides were also connected to this macabre facility. Because of its haunting history, the MTV series Fear used Fairfield Hills as its setting in one of its episodes. The movie Sleepers, starring Robert De Niro and Kevin Bacon, was also staged in Newtown. Passing through the fearsome tunnels underneath the hospital proved haunting for aspiring adventurers and thrill-seekers. For well over 80 years, Fairfield Hills was Newtown's sole cryptic mystery. However, with the passing of the year 2012, the town of Sandyhook, located within Newtown, infamously and perhaps forever replaced Fairfield Hills' enigmatic nature. Everyone loves a mystery, especially the unsolved variety. But some mysteries are so far-reaching as to impact thousands, even millions of people. It was on December 14th when the impossible happened. And looking back now, perhaps it was impossible indeed. We were told that a 20-year-old so-called autistic kid with no clear motive opened up on a classroom of elementary school children, allegedly killing 20 first graders, 6 adults, and himself. Only 2 women were reported to have survived their injuries, including Natalie Hammond and another woman whose identity was initially redacted. Prior to his shooting spree, Adam Lanza is said to have murdered his own mother, Nancy Lanza, in her bed. So the story goes. In the immediate aftermath, skeptics felt there was something terribly wrong with the official story and the way the media reported it, with the way the parents acted. With the way the coroner acted. With the way the neighbors acted.
Nobody knows them, which is odd for this neighborhood. It's very odd because a lot of people in this neighborhood know each other.
And with the way public officials acted. A lack of physical and video evidence also enhanced the curiosity of the skeptics. A strong public reaction quickly followed the peculiar press conferences and interviews, resulting in a few YouTube videos receiving over 10 million views. As time went on, public reaction died down, and the anomalous behavior was swept under the rug and forgotten. However, a few independent journalists and concerned citizens never forgot, and stayed the course by deciding to investigate the event for themselves, to see truly once and for all if the event was in fact real or staged. Did the conspicuous acting of Robbie Parker, the stumbling and fumbling coroner, and the apparent walking around at the firehouse point to a sinister staged event for specific government and corporate agendas? Or were these perceivable red flags just a figment of the imagination? The following segments, dealing with a variety of anomalous aspects of the Sandyhook events, the investigation, the official report, and the people involved, were contributed by independent journalists in the Sandyhook research community. Each participant's segment is narrated in their own voice. However, they're identified only by their YouTube handle and appear in shadow. This is for two reasons. First, we stand firmly that the information we've provided is accurate and the few conclusions presented are reasonable. There are unknown thousands of people of like mind that could have presented the same information. Secondly, throughout the course of our investigation, there have been numerous attempts to derail our efforts. Most of these have been in the form of attacks on our person and have included direct threats. There is good reason to protect our identities. Ultimately, the viewer's focus should be on the information and not the presenter.
Shakespeare wrote, "All the world's a stage." After the Sandy Hook event, the stage was set for the parents of the alleged victims to promote gun control, mental health checks, far-out school security measures, and changes to school curriculums, all the while collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars through government grants and donations. Some actors on this stage are literally just that, actors. Some are entertainers, and some are connected to groups who would benefit from this agenda. Let's take a look at a few examples. Francine Lobis Wheeler, mother of alleged victim Ben Wheeler, is a former personal assistant to the finance chairwoman of the Democratic Committee, Maureen White. Both Maureen White and her husband, Stephen Ratner, are members of the Council on Foreign Relations, and Ratner is known to have, quote, ruffled feathers with gun control advocate Michael Bloomberg, unquote, according to the New York Times. Francine is an actor and a singer who has performed such amazing hits as Jumping to Conclusions, Nicky Nicky Knock Knock, and I Can't Tie My Shoes.
Jumping to conclusions, jumping to conclusions, hopping up and down and calling paper cuts contusions. Raise your hands in the air, shake them like you didn't care.
I tell you all in earnest, I don't have to tie my
She also starred in the animated porn Mutant Aliens in 2001 as the voice of Josie. Her husband David is also an actor. He ironically starred in the dark gun film Faithful in 2001. Both can be seen lobbying for gun control in various mainstream media interviews. In fact, Francine became the first person other than Obama or Vice President Biden to deliver the White House's weekly address.
As you've probably noticed, I'm not the president. I'm just a citizen. And as a citizen, I'm here at the White House.
Mark Barden, parent of alleged victim Daniel Barden, is a lifelong entertainer, composer, and musician. As shown on the whitehouse.gov website, Barden leads policy and outreach efforts for Sandyhook Promise, an organization that is committed to affecting policy in the areas of mental health, gun access, enhanced school security, and the reduction of firearm magazines.
Nicole Hockley, mother of Dylan, graduated from Trinity College where she majored in English and theater. She has publicly admitted regret of not continuing her acting and directing career. Perhaps with Sandy Hook, she got her shot. Jimmy Green, father of Anna Marquez Green, is an entertainer and musician. Both he and his wife, Nelba Marquez Green, are strong advocates for gun control. Scarlett Lewis, mother of Jesse Lewis, is pushing school curriculums with a new age type of cognitive training. In pursuit of this, she is joined by a former CIA agent, Christopher Cook, as well as Barack Obama's sister, Maya Switoro. She is seen practicing this technique in front of an oversized Newtown Choose Love banner. Her communications degree is no doubt handy at speaking events. She appears to revel in the reaction to her preposterous and frankly unbelievable stories of Jesse mystically signaling her from beyond the grave. A medicine show to forward her school curriculum agenda.
I feel him all around me, all the time. I knew in my heart that Jesse had done something brave by running into the line of fire, trying to save his friends, which he was successful. I don't know when Jesse had written it, but it was shortly before he died. And it says, nurturing, healing, love. And 2 days before he had died, he had drawn a picture of an angel standing in front of what is obviously a bad man.
I feel like Jesse was born brave. Jesse was 11 pounds when he was born. And I remember going to the nursery, and all the nurses were gathered around the window taking pictures. And I walked up and I said, "What are you taking pictures of?" And they said, "There's this enormous baby that's crawled almost out of his bassinet." And that was Jesse.
Michelle and Bob Gay, Alyssa and Robbie Parker, Cindy and Mark Mattioli, Krista and Rich Ricos, all parents of alleged victims, have teamed up with Safe and Sound Security. Claiming to keep kids safe, Safe and Sound Security has partnered with Navigate Prepared, a Big Brother-like security system that surveils entire schools with 360-degree video feeds of classrooms, utility closets, and hallways. In addition to schools, Navigate also monitors government buildings, such as the town hall and library in Michelle Gay's hometown in Massachusetts. As founder of Safe and Sound Security, Michelle Gay has promoted this Orwellian school security system throughout the U.S. Navigate has even donated a system in honor of Michelle Gay's alleged daughter. Lenny Posner and Veronique Haller-Posner are the parents of Noah. Lenny has concerned himself with people who believe Sandyhook was a hoax. He has participated in group discussions, chats, blogs, and has talked to many researchers. In his article published by the Hartford Courant, he bashes people whom he terms conspiracy theorists and hoaxers. Lenny is the chairman and CEO of Traxware, a company that specializes in removal of internet slander, internet defamation, mugshots, defamations of character, and online public records. This guy's company would come in handy to any Sandy Hook hoax perpetrators with prior convictions. He could ultimately remove any negative associations from the internet. Could he be hanging around online bloggers and researchers for the purpose of protecting the Sandy Hook parents? His wife Veronique Haller's angle is best described by Tyranny News Network.
You may remember Veronique Posner, or Veronique Haller-Posner. Her detailed memorial for Noah Posner, the son she claims to have lost, was featured by CNN's Anderson Cooper. Take some time to learn more about Veronique Haller, and you'll find she's a legal counselor for the government of Switzerland. You can reach her directly at Switzerland's embassy in Washington. How can we be certain this is the same Veronique Haller-Posner? It was widely reported that she was a nurse by profession. Get yourself a copy of the 7th Annual Conference of the States Parties to Amended Protocol 2 to the Convention on Prohibitions or Restrictions on the Use of Certain Conventional Weapons which may be deemed to be excessively injurious or to have indiscriminate effects. She's listed as a diplomatic collaborator for the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs representing Switzerland. Her real-life mission to prohibit weapons mirrors her actions while engaged in the grieving mother scam. While pretending to have lost a 6-year-old child to a gun-wielding madman, she said, quote, "I think he had a mother who, at worst, aided and abetted him." She added, quote, "I think there was gross irresponsibility. Words more fitting of an attorney than an oncology nurse." It gets much worse, though. As I said, she is only pretending to have lost a child. Following the trail of Veronique's friends and family, you arrive at Patricia Ordonez Holler. Right at the top of her Facebook photos page is the familiar face of Noah Posner, and what looks like his sister, and two drawings obviously made by a child of about 6. But the strange heading above the 4 photos reads, 10 years ago, happy birthday Kevin, we love you. One of the 2 drawings reads, quote, Pappy Dirk, have a great birthday at the island, from Kevin. Examining the photo, we've all been told as of Noah, we see its EXIF date is Saturday, December 15th, 2012. Only one day after the Sandyhook event. Isn't it more likely the photo said to be of Noah is really that of Kevin, taken 10 years ago?
And it is confirmed, despite many claiming otherwise, that Veronique is in fact from Switzerland. An article from Haaretz focusing on Noah Posner, dated December 28, 2012, states, quote, Veronique was born in Switzerland to French parents who raised her in Scarsdale, New York, unquote. Now, can it be considered a mere coincidence that 2 Veronique Hollers, both from Switzerland, are calling for unconstitutional gun control measures in the U.S.?
Such weapons have no place in our society.
Veronique's anti-assault weapon stance is echoed with most of the visible Sandyhook characters, and has been shown to go to even extreme lengths, as in the case of Mark Barden and his children.
My daughter Natalie was interested in asking him if he could pass some kind of legislation so that the only people that had guns were military personnel and law enforcement.
Whether you are anti-gun or pro-gun is not the issue. The issue at hand is that legislation has been passed as a result of the lobbying of these parents after an event that, as we will see, may be entirely fabricated. As a result of the passing of Senate Bill 1160, Connecticut citizens have publicly voiced their frustrations.
With the stroke of a pen from the ivory tower with the gold top, you've decided to create me to be a felon, a Class D felony, for doing absolutely nothing wrong. Okay?
The Sandyhook characters are larger than life. They're not afraid to lobby, speak publicly, or pursue their agenda, all the while looking comfortable doing it. Sandyhook funds reaching upwards of as much as $27 million have been issued out to victims' family members. Yet, parents such as the Kowalskis are still comfortable requesting annual goals for as much as $500,000 while soliciting for these goals at public events. The information presented regarding the Sandyhook parents is public, can be found by anyone, and is a culmination of research done by many people throughout the past 2 years. The aforementioned background information was included in this segment to arm you, the viewer, with essential information to get you closer to the event. Watching the mainstream media will only give you one side of the coin, as many media pundits have claimed that the Sandyhook characters were not actors or entertainers. Yet throughout the past 2 years, independent researchers have proved otherwise. And despite their claim that the Sandyhook event would not define them, the Sandyhook characters have virtually given up their day job and attained a full-time lobbying position. From Delaware to Illinois to Arizona, the Sandyhook parents have traveled the country promoting their agendas. This documentary is not meant to focus on speculation, but rather focus on lesser-known facts, inconsistencies, and lies that the general public is unaware of. Remember when Robbie Parker walked out on stage to speak to the media the day after his daughter died? Although common sense will tell you he was acting, this documentary will not focus on pure speculation. Instead, the intention is to give you a broader background and a new perspective on the reality that is Sandy Hook.
Hey, this is Sherry. I just have to mention this. Here's the official police report as things happened. And a trooper video of over 4 hours doesn't show any children evacuating the school. Well, I found the timeline of when they did evacuate the school of all the kids. All right, 9:57, this McGeever runs with whoever across the parking lot towards the Sandyhook firehouse. 9:58, Keene arrives on the scene and assists with the evacuation of the students and teachers from Sandyhook Elementary School to the firehouse. They started evacuating the school from the official time at 9:58. All right, so let's see them evacuating the school. Here is that trooper, that 4-hour trooper vehicle. You can see it is parked on one side of the parking lot, and it has the view all the way over. It has the time at 9:57 and even the seconds. The first thing that we should be seeing is at 9:57:40, runs with blank across the parking lot. All right, let's see it. What are we supposed to see at 9:57:40? We're supposed to see her running across the parking lot. Oh, content redacted. So maybe that's when they ran across the parking lot. Now, within a few seconds, they're supposed to start evacuating the school. Now remember, this trooper is parked all the way on one side of the parking lot and views the parking lot the whole time. Any moment now, we should see either many minutes of content redacted, or we should see huge group of children coming out. Of course, we need to give them time to start doing it, you know. Okay, so maybe this is when they're coming out. 10 o'clock. Teachers, blank, and student run across parking lot with a detective. Okay, so at 10 o'clock and 45 seconds. Okay, let's keep going here. We haven't seen the masses of children yet coming out. Oh, somebody else at 10:01 starts helping with the evacuation of the students and the teachers. Content redacted. Now, this should last quite a few minutes if they're getting the kids across. I mean, there's a lot of kids to get across. Remember that one picture of FBI agent and so on running with a few kids, and they were pictured right there? And the children were taken to the Sandyhook firehouse at 10:03. Leading a group of young kids out the front at 10:03. Let's go back to 10:03, shall we? There's 10:03. Let's see. There's 10:03:06. Let's watch this. Video does not match the story. Children are escorted from the front of Sandyhook. Another large group coming out. All right, and then at 10:06, so we're going to have some children being escorted, and at 10:06, the people that were in the conference room should be escorted across. And at 10:07, escorts blank across. 10:07, children are escorted out of the building. 10:07, children are escorted from the northeast corner. 10:08, children are escorted out of the building. At 10:12 is when they bring another group of children out to the firehouse, out from the gym area. And we're not seeing it. I'm not seeing the content redacted either. In other words, you know what this shows? This shows the official report does not match the video. This shows there are not masses of children that were evacuated. At 10:14:59, escorts children to the firehouse. This vehicle, this police car, showed all the way across. The vehicle is right there, looking all the way across. During the 4 hours, as you've seen, it does not match the timeline. All right, there you go. Official story doesn't match video.
My nickname is Swansong, and I am the editor of InsaneMedia.net, and this is the Don Hochsprung File. An online article from the Newtown Bee was posted December 14, 2012. In part, the article claimed to have received a quote from the principal of Sandyhook Elementary, who stated that a masked man entered the building with a gun and fired more shots than she could count. The only problem was the principal, Don Hochsprung, had allegedly died in the initial hail of gunfire. A few days later, an embarrassed and ashamed Newtown Bee published a retraction and apology of the anomalous article. So, should we just chalk this one up to the chaos of the day and write it off as a mere mistake? Well, not so fast. While studying the anomalous article, a Bing cache date was noted. A cache date of December 13th, 2012, the day before the event. A shocking discovery, to say the least. But before we get our underwear in a bunch, let's see if this seemingly apparent evidence of foreknowledge is but a simple glitch in the system. Puzzled by who the author of the article actually was, as there was no name attributed, I at first assumed it could only be associate editor Shannon Hicks, since she was the first reporter from the Bee on the scene. To confirm, I contacted Miss Hicks, who suggested I speak to Curtis Clark, chief editor of the Newtown Bee. Mr. Clark in turn stated that the writer of the article was John Voquette, a well-known radio personality from Newtown and an associate editor for the Bee. Voquette attributed the mistake to the commotion of the day. How could such a crucial misidentification be attributed to the commotion of the day when Hochsprung was a known personality in the community and even appeared in videos from the Newtown Bee in years past? Voquette's response was that the woman with whom he spoke, face to face, shared some of the same physical attributes as Hochsprung. How this unknown and unidentified woman, who shared the same attributes as the Sandyhook principal, who shared first-hand knowledge of the alleged shooting, and who herself claimed to be the school principal, came into contact with the Newtown Bee in the first place is also a great mystery. But the greatest mystery of all, and perhaps the only bit of information that could make sense of this mess, is the Bing cache date of December 13th. If the cache date was found to be correct, it would be monumental, as it would prove foreknowledge of the event and disprove anything Voquette and the Newtown Bee stated. And as Dr. Wayne Carver so famously said, everything would come crashing down on the heads of Newtown. In an attempt to confirm the validity of the Bing cache date of December 13th, I contacted Bing. Unfortunately, they have no number to call, so all correspondence was done by email. After 7 months of correspondence, I finally got my answer. Leonard, a Microsoft customer support member, stated the following. I understand that you wanted to know the accuracy of the last crawl date that you were able to see from the cache page from Bing. To directly answer your question, the date setting which the web crawler shows on the cache page is accurate. Not satisfied with one response, I went for a second opinion. This time I got Mark. Thank you for getting back to us. The server cache time is accurate since it is being updated once our crawler visits a certain page. For example, our crawler visits a page today, June 3rd, 2013. The date reflected on its cache page will be June 3rd, 2013. The date will change after our web crawler visits the page again. The final icing on the cake came when I found an article entitled Superintendent Reports on State of Schools. This article from the Newtown Bee focused on an event that occurred on December 10th, and it was also cached on December 13th, clearly making this cache date accurate. And if that cache date is accurate, then, as they say, that's where the rubber hits the road. Considering these cache dates are correct, which they most certainly are, this is Microsoft we're talking about after all, this brings up many questions. Was Don Hochsprung not supposed to die, but somehow did, in perhaps a drill gone wrong? Or was this an entirely fabricated event, a drill in which nobody died, and Don Hochsprung is somewhere alive and well? Her daughter, Erica Lafferty, after all, is comfortable making light of her mother's death as she poses with a CIA sweatshirt. I forwarded my original article to Lafferty. She never replied. Nevertheless, there are many questions, and it's about time somebody started answering.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm an independent journalist, and because of that, you've probably never heard of me. But if you have come across any of my work, it's likely you found it on my YouTube channel, Tyranny News Network. Before I created that channel, I had a blog at tyrannynews.com, where I began to publish articles on various social, socioeconomic, and political issues. It speaks to the success of YouTube that my blog fell far short of receiving the attention that my YouTube channel has. And attention, in the form of subscribers to my channel or through whatever means, has always been my goal. Attention to what, you might ask? Which I don't find offensive in the least. It demonstrates that you're thinking critically about what I'm presenting and what my motivations are. Regardless of how corny it sounds, my purpose has been to help others discover history and learn about our present society with enough raw data to form their own perspectives. The major media outlets don't provide us with unvarnished, meaningful news, and the result is a nation of people with very limited understanding of events taking place in their world. What little they do know is a combination of fallacies and trivial points that aren't sufficient to form a useful worldview. I've been fortunate to have stumbled onto researching deep politics. So, as I see it, Sandyhook is an issue important enough that every American should have a detailed account of the event available to them. And I mean full disclosure. That's why I'm participating in this project. I'm going to begin my segment with what some will surely call a minor issue, but I tend to measure the significance of certain evidence using an entirely different scale. I view evidence that is synchronous or seemingly coincidental as highly interesting. On the day of the Sandyhook event, while the activities we've all seen were taking place at the primary crime scene, there was another crime scene being discovered. The investigation was said to have spread into areas near to the school, where it appears from the limited footage available that a search for suspects was taking place. Later in the day, events were taking place in New Jersey, the arrest of Ryan Lanza, for instance. But the only other officially reported crime scene besides the school itself was the Lanza residence on Yogananda Street. At the time of this production, the Lanza home was left mostly intact. There's very little that would indicate it was the scene of a horrible murder. Some minor damage to the garage door, a notice posted on the door. It appears much of the furnishings are still in the home. The neighborhood is back to its pre-school shooting pace. But back in December 2012, the neighborhood was a hub of activity. Residents were stopped and questioned. Yogananda Street, on which the Lanzas are said to have lived, had been blocked by squad cars and police tape. With the release of the final report, a number of aerial photos of the street and the Lanza home was provided. But it appears from what can be seen that the photos were taken within the span of only a few minutes, and no indication of the time of the photo series is given. But there is something vaguely interesting about one photo. This white and blue house is said to be the Lanzas. This home next door is said to be the home of the Trent Acosta family. Upon examining the driveway at the Lanza home, there doesn't appear to be any obvious signs of activity having taken place. However, when we examine the Trent Acosta's driveway, there appears to be tire tracks from cars that drove indiscriminately over their lawn. To help visualize the tracks, I've highlighted them. Based on what the aerial photos depict, one could draw the conclusion that they were taken later in the day or afternoon. But were there any aerial photos taken from that morning? It turns out that there's at least one. Here's a photo depicting the same general area, with the Lanza home on the left and the Trent Acosta home on the right. But oddly, the Lanza home doesn't appear to be the focus of attention. The home next door, on the other hand, can be seen to have at least 2 vehicles in the driveway and a couple of figures, which I assume are investigators. It doesn't appear that the home is being used as a staging area for convenience. The barricade created by the squad car and police tape is at the next door driveway. If I didn't know better, this early photo of the scene would give me the impression that the secondary crime scene was this greenhouse. What were they doing at the home next door? This isn't evidence of anything conclusive at this point, but it's an anomaly that has puzzled me since first seeing this photo.
Hi, I'm known on YouTube as Odin Rock. On December 14th, 2012, I was driving my daughter home from daycare when a news bulletin about a school shooting in Connecticut came on the radio. As soon as we got home, I made sure my daughter was occupied and then turned on the TV news. I was expecting to see a scene of chaos, of weeping enraged parents, gnashing of teeth, pulling of hair. What I saw instead was first responders lounging around smiling, parents nonchalantly walking calm children to their cars. Over the next few days, the scene only became more bizarre, with conflicting accounts and victims' families seemingly ecstatic and hungry for attention. There were many troubling and suspiciously anomalous characteristics to the event, but what really solidified my gut feeling that something was obscenely wrong with the situation was the blatant cover-up and official concealment of evidence, to the point we are left to ask if there is any evidence this event took place whatsoever. We can postulate this cover-up began more than a year before the event, when raised Bill 1054, an act concerning the disclosure of pediatric autopsy reports, was introduced in the Connecticut legislature. Initially opposed by Chief Medical Examiner Wayne Carver as redundant, he later inexplicably did an about-face and supported the bill, which would end up being passed in October 2011, effectively concealing all pediatric autopsy reports from public examination. Why do this? Was this ever a problem? Fast forward to the weekend of the event. Debbie Aurelia, Newtown town clerk, effectively breaks the law by refusing requests from the Associated Press, the New York Post, the Hartford Courant, and other media for copies of the death certificates of the victims. Miss Aurelia, the subject of 2 ethics hearings in 2010, and the future wife of Sandyhook Fire Chief Bill Halstead, soon went so far as to craft legislation with state representatives Belinsky, Hovey, and McKinney to restrict all death records and marriage records for perpetuity across the state of Connecticut.
What else are we talking about? Are we still talking about death certificates, which have been available for hundreds of years?
I believe the bill covers 4 key elements. Crime scene photos are our top priority for us, without a doubt, and that is for the adults as well as the children. The 911 tapes, because hearing can be just as bad as seeing. There is also questions over the death certificates, which have some private information on them, and also statements, which we would like to be redacted.
FOIA reps and professional genealogists were vehemently opposed, along with the press, and editorials were run against it in papers as nationally prominent as the New York Times. As public suspicion intensified, the cover-up went into full swing as the original bill was amended to include public release of 9/11 calls, any photographs, and even witness statements. The alleged victims' families were even brought to the Capitol to lobby for the bill, going so far as to stand on the floor of the legislature on the last night of deliberation. They continually stressed the non-release of photos of dead children, even though no request had been made, and the release of such photos had been unheard of. Supporters went so far as to bring race into the debate by enlisting the Black and Puerto Rican caucus to push for the bill to cover all homicides in Connecticut, thereby making all homicide records inaccessible to FOIA requests. Parents also continually brought up in press conferences that they feared the use of such material by conspiracy theorists and internet bloggers. The bill, which had been drafted in secret behind closed doors and without the usual opportunity for public comment, passed at 2 a.m. on the last night of legislature before adjournment. It left the release of 911 calls up for debate, but the release of all other records for all homicides in Connecticut would be left up to the discretion of the families. The bill passed unanimously with only 2 no votes and was signed by Governor Malloy on June 5, 2013. Outrage over the bill from the Freedom of Information advocates led to the formation of the Victims' Privacy and Public's Right to Know Task Force. The 17-member task force was weighed heavily in favor of privacy, with only 2 representatives on the side of the Freedom of Information, and they were repeatedly berated at almost every meeting for their perceived insensitivity to the victims' families. Over 6 months, the panel heard from members of the press, law enforcement, and the victims' families who repeatedly claimed their rights were being violated by those seeking evidence of a crime there was still no substantial proof of even having occurred.
The law also created a 17-member task force to study and make recommendations to the Assembly on what should and should not be released about crimes. Among those selected to serve on the task force is Officer Jillian Knox of the New Haven Police Department's Victim Services Unit.
In my city, the victims that I interact with on a daily basis, they feel as though everything needs to be private.
The legislature and the governor were prompted to act because of Sandyhook, but it became clear that some believed that was unfair to all of the state's other crime victims.
Families have a very real interest in not being publicized on the radio and television. I think there's a balance, though, that the public has a right to know certain things, and I think that's something that this committee needs to focus on.
There are other lawyers, victim advocates, media representatives, and state lawmakers on this panel that must make recommendations on where the lines should be drawn, including Representative Deborah Hovey, who represents Sandyhook and who has expressed strong opinions about the media.
Initially, especially those first 4 or so months, I just felt that the media was over the top.
At the meeting to review the final report of the panel, the 2 Freedom of Information representatives were surprised to learn that a 5-year prison term Class D felony provision for the public release of information pertaining to any homicide had been inserted as a recommendation in the report. The report was approved with 15 members' support, the 2 Freedom of Information members abstaining with strong objections. The report resulted in the drafting of Senate Bill 388, which proposed the non-release of any information that would constitute, quote, an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, applicable to any person, not just the families of crime victims. All victims and witnesses' names would also remain private.
Access to basic information, including the names of witnesses, is essential to reversing wrongful convictions. This bill would make those efforts impossible in the state of Connecticut. The language in this section undermines transparency and accountability in our criminal justice system on a massive scale.
It's Orwellian, is what I think it is.
Well,
my solution is just keep things the way they are.
You want to leave 13311?
I want to keep public records public, because it's not just murder, it's not just homicides that is issue. It's all public records.
At the meeting to review the final report, and this is important, and everybody should go watch the video I made of this incident. At the meeting to review the final report of the panel, the 2 FOIA representatives were surprised to learn that a 5-year prison term Class D felony provision for the public release of information pertaining to any homicide had been inserted as a recommendation in the report. The report was approved with 15 members' support, the 2 FOIA members abstaining with strong objections.
Completely absurd.
It's completely absurd.
None of this makes any sense if Sandy Hook was a real event, but it makes a whole lot of sense if there's a tremendous amount to cover up because it was only a drill, and the whole state is embarrassed because it was all complicit in the event, so they're doing everything they can, conceal access to the kind of evidence that would refute the story and demonstrate it was a hoax.
These 2 FOIA representatives, one of them is almost in tears that they had been sitting through the 6 months of meetings with these people, you know, and if you've ever been in that kind of commission or something, you develop relationships with the people in the commission, and they're all being friendly with you, and then they pull the rug out from under you at the last meeting for the recommendations, and basically just bald-faced lie to you that they had discussed this 5-year penalty for releasing any information pertaining to any homicide. Okay, not just Sandyhook, any homicide. It's just a travesty. Law enforcement and the state can get away with whatever they want to do in Connecticut now. Okay, the citizens of Connecticut have no recourse now. In effect, the bill left it to law enforcement to decide what information it would release. The implications are horrendous. Those considered wrongly convicted would have no access to information for appeal. and the decision to release information pertaining to corruption and a wide array of abuse by law enforcement would be left up to that same law enforcement agency. The legislature ended up in deadlock on the amended privacy bill, which means the original draconian limits on release of information still stand. At this point in time, the citizens of Connecticut have no access to records on any homicide, effectively leaving it up to law enforcement what information will be released. In addition to this, Peter Lanza has refused to provide any information on Adam Lanza's mental health. This did not stop him from giving an interview to The New Yorker. When child rights organization Able Child petitioned to have the information released on what medications Lanza was on, they were told by the Deputy Attorney General it would not be released because it may stop the mentally ill from taking their medication. Add to this the massively redacted official report. The reluctance to release information every step of the way can only be seen as a blatant cover-up. Why not release Lanza's medical records? For that matter, why not release any evidence at all of Lanza's presence in the school that day? It may surprise the general public that there has been no evidence presented of a causal nexus between Lanza and the alleged crime. Surely the release of this information would end most of the speculation by concerned members of the public who have been deemed hoaxers, by those who should have nothing to hide. Aren't the alleged parents of these children interested in this information? Would it not help us to prevent an event like this in the future if we knew Lanza's mental state leading up to that day?
Hello, my name is Jeff C. I'm an independent blogger and media analyst who runs an alternative YouTube channel called Free Radio Revolution. My specialty is to break down events that are reported by the corporate media and try to expose the truth behind these events and what they really are about. I started covering Sandyhook right after the event occurred. At first I reacted like many, with grief and anger. But my focus quickly shifted to all the inconsistencies of the official story and the complete ineptitude of the corporate media in investigating the alleged shooting. One of the very first characters that caught my attention was none other than Gene Rosen, a retired pet sitter who had become the focal point of numerous corporate media stories on Sandyhook.
You need way more room 'cause your heart's too big for your house. Gene Rosen, roses bloom and elm trees sway for what you did that fateful day.
Gene Rosen was portrayed by the corporate media as the hero of Sandyhook for having provided shelter to 6 Sandyhook elementary school children in the wake of the alleged shooting. An important thing to keep in mind while watching this segment is that Gene Rosen has an extensive background in acting and is the CEO of the Newton Cable Advisory. He has also appeared in several stage productions, including a recent production of The Fantastics. Gene Rosen's story about how he came across the 6 children on his front lawn after the Sandyhook shooting changes with every interview. In one interview, he's talking about how he came out of the loft where he fed the cats. In another one, he's talking about he was on his way to breakfast. Then in another interview, he said he saw the children through his window. Finally, he said that he was walking home from breakfast and saw the children on his front lawn. Upon approaching the children, Gene makes reference to a man speaking kind of harshly in some interviews as well as a school bus driver, while in other interviews, Gene completely omits the man speaking kind of harshly to the children.
And I saw a man talking to them in a very harsh way, and he seemed agitated. He kept saying, "It's going to be all right, it's going to be all right."
One would assume with Gene's background as being a psychologist who worked at the Newtown Fairfield State Hospital that he would be able to count. Unfortunately, according to the official report, the bus driver, who Gene constantly refers to, claims that only 4 children were brought to Gene Rosen's house. Gene Rosen's account of what the children told him about their traumatic experience seems very scripted and poorly acted out. Watch all the theatrics he puts into describing the kids who had allegedly just witnessed their beloved teacher, Victoria Soto, get shot, and take note of the multiple inconsistencies.
I can't go back to the school. We can't go back to the school. We can't go back to the school. We don't have a teacher. We don't have a teacher. Mrs. Soto, Mrs. Soto. Mrs. Soto is dead. There's blood. She had blood in her mouth and she fell, and there was two guns, a big gun and a small gun. I can't go back to the school. I can't go back to the school. I don't have a teacher. I don't have a teacher. And then the other boy said, Mrs. Soto, my teacher's been shot. I could not fathom this. I could not imagine what they were talking about. I could not fathom in my mind what had happened.
Equally puzzling is what Gene did with the children that came to his house. Either the parents came and picked them up, or some of them went to the firehouse, or all of them went to the firehouse. Either way, Gene goes out of his way to illustrate the joy that the parents had when they came to the house.
Explain to me what that moment was like.
When their parents came, I was so happy. Their parents is what they needed, and their parents came to the house. My arms were not long enough.
Once again, Gene Rosen's testimony completely conflicts with that of the school bus driver in the official report. Whereas Gene Rosen said that all the parents came to his home to pick up the kids, or all the kids went to the firehouse, the school bus driver says in the official report that 3 of the 4 kids were picked up by their parents at Gene Rosen's house, while the 4th child was taken by both of them to the firehouse. Gene Rosen repeatedly mentions a woman who came to his house with a face frozen in fear after the children had been collected by their parents, or after Gene had taken them down to the firehouse. This woman, whose name was only mentioned once, is none other than Scarlett Lewis, the mother of Jesse, who was another hero on that particular day.
Jesse was a hero that day. He was not just a victim. I can't imagine a 6-year-old having the presence of mind to take that kind of action. I would think he would be, like all of them, just terrified.
The purpose of this storyline is to bridge the children of Victoria Soto's class to Jesse Lewis, who saved their lives by telling them to run while Adam Lanza was reloading his magazine.
This was the worst thing that happened. This beautiful woman came to my door. She was so pretty, but her face was frozen. It was frozen in fear. It looked...
And so, trusty Gene Rosen, the former psychologist and theater actor, has his entire story debunked neatly by the helicopter footage that was filmed on the morning of the shooting at 10:30 a.m. One can clearly see Mr. Rosen bumbling around, perhaps even reciting his lines. There's even a brief interview which he gives which proves that he was there, which of course means that he couldn't have been at his home with the children, nor could he have been there to receive Scarlett Lewis.
I want to hold them. I want to be with them. I want to tell them that there is light after the darkness.
We have already established that Gene Rosen has an acting background. So would it surprise you if we have confirmed evidence that Rosen was indeed acting throughout all of his interviews? Let's take a look at one video in particular. It's a Gene Rosen video that is not from a news outlet, but was uploaded to the internet nonetheless. In this video, Gene is caught rehearsing his lines. Let's check it out.
School bus driver picked them up. I think she had just let off some kids or was in the area. And they came inside the house and they started talking about blood coming out of her mouth. And they said, "What are we going to do for a teacher? Our teacher's dead." Matt, I mean, they were so distraught.
As you've seen from the video, it was the cameraman who corrected Gene. How could a cameraman correct the person talking unless the entire thing was scripted? In case you didn't catch it, the reason why the cameraman corrected Jean was because in this version of the story, Jean states that the children immediately started talking about their teacher dying as they entered the house. It was at this point when the cameraman whispers, "No," and Jean waves his arms up in the air and states, Matt, I mean. In his mainstream media interviews, Jean changes the script by stating that the kids didn't tell him about the teacher dying until 15 to 20 minutes after their stay in his house.
How did you first learn, and it was 4 little girls and 2 little boys, that they had just run, literally, from Victoria Soto's classroom, a teacher who was killed in front of them?
I didn't learn about it till around 15 minutes or 20 minutes into their stay at my house.
The obvious reason why the cameraman and Jean are flustered is because Jean would be negligent if he didn't immediately call 911 after hearing the news of a shooting in which a teacher was shot dead. Even though his story is ridiculous as it is, it would hold zero ground if he had done nothing but have the kids play with toys while knowing their teacher was murdered. Who is this Matt guy anyway? Was it him who uploaded the video to the internet? And why did he do it? Jean was literally caught in the act lying. He provided statements to the police. If he is caught deliberately providing false statements, he could be charged with criminal acts for filing false reports and obstruction of justice, just to name a few. Not only that, but donation sites were put up in his name. He collected money based on the scripted statement. He was also spotted walking around at the firehouse. Could it be that he was rehearsing his lines there as well? Is there anyone out there that believes the school bus driver picked up a random assortment of kids after school was in session and then bypasses the firehouse and proceeds to drop them off on a stranger's lawn? Then go inside to drink juice and play with toys instead of calling the police? Are we supposed to believe this man who is a known actor and who was caught rehearsing his lines? Was Jean included in this event because of his close proximity to the school? Was he given donation money to keep him quiet? In a fair and just society, we could present these questions and the obvious discrepancies of Jean's testimonies to the justice system.
As problematic and concerning as it may be, there is evidence of foreknowledge of the purported shooting that took place in Sandyhook. Plain and simple, web pages with details of the event were put online before the event took place. And the websites where these pages appeared were the official websites of well-known organizations. This evidence of foreknowledge has been met with some of the most belligerent arguments that claim this is untrue. The most common argument being that we simply lack the knowledge required to analyze the data. Data in these cases refers to the cache of a web page kept by search engines like Bing and Google. So before I get to the evidence of foreknowledge itself, let's identify a few terms and definitions that will help you gain a better understanding of a topic you may or may not be that familiar with. Google is a company that provides many services, but for our purposes we're going to focus just on their web search service. When you search the web for a word or phrase using Google, Google presents you with a series of pages that best match your search criteria. The results are ordered by how close they match, so results on page 1 should be better or more relevant than those on page 20. What is Google providing links to? What are these results? Most results linked to by Google are simply web pages, although some of the results will be PDF, Microsoft Word, or other documents. Google's proprietary technology determines when and where those results show up. Since the vast majority of results and the evidence in this case are web pages, we'll limit our discussion to those. Google uses a very complicated and private method of choosing which results to display and the order in which to display them. The system is ever-changing and increasingly more sophisticated to abate abuse of the system. Google has detected and prevented the most clever of tricks over the years. Why would anyone want to manipulate Google's system? Imagine if you were a company that sold widgets online and had 20 web pages that advertised your widget. Imagine if, through some gaming of the Google system, every search at Google always produced links to your 20 pages before any other pages. Whether the search was Angelina Jolie or quantum mechanics, your pages came up. Although this is an extreme example, you can see how this might be desirable. How do web pages get into the results shown by Google? Before a web page can be presented as a search result, Google must first become aware of the page and index it. Then, all the various features of the page and its content can be analyzed so it can be included in search results when appropriate. This function is performed by Googlebot. Beginning with the pages it already has in its index and adding new page maps of links provided by site owners, Googlebot scours these pages for any changes and links to any new pages. Once complete, Google's index is updated accordingly. This process is ongoing, involving many bots and many billions of pages. With that background under our belt, let's examine how to determine the date that a page was last indexed by Google and what that page contained at that time. When Google visits a web page for the first time, determined by a proprietary criteria, Google may capture and store a copy of that page. You can access the cached version of a web page by clicking the link labeled Cached, shown with most search listings. Each cached page is assigned an ID and the date it was last cached. Pages that are more popular will be cached more often. Each time a page is cached, the date is updated, and if the page is changed, the new content will overwrite the old. What constitutes a page is ultimately determined by the URL address of the page. So, if a page exists that is identical in every way to another, except the URL is slightly different, Google will index it as a separate and unique page. If the URL of a page is changed in any way, then Google will consider it a new page. Even if the content of a page remains the same, a change to the URL will cause Google to index it as a new page. At around the same time, it will remove its former reference to a page. Some pages may be indexed and usually cached as well by Google once, but never qualify to be indexed or cached again, based on a number of factors. In these cases, the cached version of the page and the date of cache may be as old as 9 years. Google is not concerned with certain things that may be contained within the URL, like dates, for instance, other than keywords and phrases it will use to determine the general content of the page. So, if you were to create a page with a URL containing the date 7/15/1999, Google will still use the current date when indexing it. Google always records the date their bot visits the page, without exception. Hopefully now you understand the basics in a theoretical sense. Now let's look at some real-life examples to see if we can definitively determine if there was foreknowledge. And we'll begin with a smoking gun example that would stand up in court. While we're at it, we'll take note of just how far one person went to confuse people and hide the simple truth. It all began when the website for the Arlington Red Devils posted a web page on their site with a link to a document entitled A Guide on How to Talk to Children About Sandyhook. The guide was originally published by Crisis Management Institute. The date of the article shown on the page itself is 12/10/2012. The URL of the page also includes that date. As we just outlined, the only date that we can truly rely on to tell us when the page was last accessed by Googlebot and indexed is the date it was cached, or the cache date. To see that, we simply find the cached link for the page, and when Google's cached version of the page loads, that date will always appear in Google's disclaimer box right at the top of the page. Remember though, the cached date is updated each time Googlebot returns to visit the page. So going through this process after almost 2 years would likely show a much more recent date. But thankfully, many people were curious enough in the days immediately after the event to grab a screenshot of what the page looked like back then. And those screenshots show Google's cache date for the page as 10/13/2012, 1 day prior to the actual event. So let's add it up and see what we have here. Disregarding the content of the web page itself, which we've learned can be changed over time, we start with the URL of the page. As you can see, the URL contains the phrase, "talking with your children about the Sandyhook tragedy." That can only be a specific reference to the Sandyhook shooting event. Next, we see that Google reports a cached date of 12/13/2012 for that URL. Remember, URLs can't change or Google considers it a new page. And I might add that just because we see clear evidence that Google had last indexed the page on the 13th, it's very possible the page had been indexed earlier, say the 10th, at which time Google's cached date would have shown the 10th. Case closed. Here we have an irrefutable example of foreknowledge of the event by at minimum 1 day. Now let's see how this simple bit of deduction was extrapolated into a book-length investigation that, despite its length, never came to this conclusion. A fairly popular alternative news site, Fellowship of the Minds, ran an article back on January 13th of 2013, reporting that this same webpage appeared to have been online 4 days before the Sandyhook event. The article caused a stir and racked up many comments. But a few days later, an update to the article was added, explaining that many comments had been received, but one in particular, from a person named Peter Offerman, seemed to provide more insight. So Peter's comment was featured, which began an odyssey of endless technical jargon. This first article garnered 167 comments before comments were closed. Many of those comments were chapter-length diatribes by Mr. Offerman that danced around the technical details of everything from blogging systems to web servers, each promising to provide the conclusive evidence in the next issue. This went on for a further 3 articles and nearly 200 further comments. It was clear to me when I posted a comment to the first article that Mr. Offerman was clearly attempting to confuse the issue and doing a very good job of it. The owner of the site, who happens to have penned the 4 articles, was likely dazzled by the display and unfortunately taken for a ride. But the evidence was clear. Everyone's familiar with the United Way, and it's not surprising that they established a fund to solicit donations for those impacted by the Sandyhook event. But it appears they too jumped the gun on the event and published their webpage advertising the fund well in advance of the event. In the case of the United Way, a page was noted in the Google search results entitled Sandyhook School Support Fund and was published to their website for the Western Connecticut region. Unfortunately, I couldn't locate a screenshot taken early enough showing Google's cache date for the page. However, we do see Google's document date of the page shown as December 11, 2012. This isn't definitive since Google may derive that date from the page content, which is subject to change. In some instances, the date is grabbed from the page where the date is actually connected to another article simply linked to on the page. When I examined a copy of the page, I found no dates whatsoever. In those cases, Google claims to revert to the cache date. But since the document date of 12/11/2012 isn't definitive proof of foreknowledge, we need to dig deeper. The website insanemedia.net has done extensive research into this topic and provides us with some important clues. First, they report that the United Way has responded to allegations of foreknowledge and flatly rejected them. But this is where it gets interesting. Subsequent to that, a public relations firm contracted by the United Way forwarded an email to the Daily Caller from an engineer at Google reading as follows. This is a technical glitch on our end. The date Google's search engine first saw the page was 12/14/2012 at 6:58 p.m. We're looking into a fix, but it may take some weeks. Being somewhat of an expert in these matters, I can say that this explanation is utterly ridiculous. In fact, I find it very difficult to believe that a Google engineer would make such a claim. But given that this is presented as the official explanation from the United Way's perspective, let's see if there's any other evidence that would support that. As shown right on the page in question, the United Way Fund was actually established by the Newtown Savings Bank. Not surprisingly, the president and CEO of the Newtown Savings Bank is John Trentacosta. The very same Trent Acosta that owned the home next door to the Lanzas and where all the activity was taking place on the morning of the event. Mr. Trent Acosta is a bigger fish than some might think, as he's a member of an important council at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Mr. Trent Acosta is quoted as saying, "The fund came together as a response to countless requests, presumably to counter any criticism that the fund was simply a fraudulent scheme. But that's just speculation. However, the statement does present a problem. We know from the Google engineer's statement that the web page soliciting donations for the fund was indexed by Google on 12/14/2012 at 6:58 p.m., the very evening of the event. How much earlier than that time was the page first put online is unknown. But in any case, one has to wonder how it was possible in such a short time to first receive those countless requests, come up with the concept for the fund, meet to plan the whole thing, establish the bank account to collect those donations, coordinate with the United Way, determine the slogans and taglines for the campaign, create the artwork and the web pages themselves, and finally to get all of that up and running online. If it were possible at all, it would be a world record. I don't know how many people have donated, but the total taken in is in the millions. I find the explanations given to account for how quickly this fund was put together to be dubious. In the end, it may be this potentially fraudulent fund and the legal pursuit to reclaim those donations made by innocent people who were simply duped that becomes the first domino to fall in the greater fall of the Sandyhook hoax.
The official report, a 6,700-page data dump deprived of any useful or pertinent information because of its plethora of redactions. Well, that's how most people have described the official report as released by the Connecticut State Police. This report could have put to rest all of the skepticism from people who believe Sandy Hook was indeed a manufactured event. Instead, because of its many inconsistencies and contradictions found inside, even more questions have been raised. The excuse of a rush report cannot be used in this case because it took almost a whole year to release it. Due to their lack of urgency, Lieutenant Paul Vance and State's Attorney Stephen Sedensky came under heavy fire for their lengthy delay. When asked about when he planned on releasing the report to the public, Lieutenant Paul Vance merely replied, quote, "Nobody ever said that we had to have it done by a certain time," unquote. The egotism of Vance and the withholding of information seems to be a recurring theme. After all, he did in fact call himself the Master.
I think it's up to you to talk with your legislators and talk
well,
with
the legislators don't listen. They don't listen.
There's nothing I can do about it, man.
Yes, there is, because you can refuse to follow unlawful orders.
Okay.
If you can't do that, that means you're an enemy of America.
Okay, ma'am, I'm not discussing this with you. I think our conversation's over. I suggest you contact your attorney, ma'am.
So really,
okay.
all right, just remember, okay, you're the servant, we're the masters, okay? And if you come to my home...
Ma'am. I'm the master. You're
really?
absolutely right.
You're the master?
Thank you very much for your
no, you're the servant.
Ma'am.
You're the servant. We're the masters.
Yeah. Thank
you come
very
to my
much for your
home...
conversation, ma'am. Okay.
And in mid-2014, he found himself in a similar bind when he did not release another crime report within a respectful manner of time.
Was there anything unusual about the state police handling of this because of who was involved?
Not at all. A thoroughly complete investigation. Arrest was made, was turned over to Superior Court for prosecution.
Nevertheless, this report, which can be downloaded at the government website cspsandyhookreport.ct.gov, is their final word, their official statement. And when we find inconsistencies and contradictions within this report, they should be obligated to defend it. Now, one humongous inconsistency can be found in the supplemental DNA reports from the forensic laboratory. The report numbers are shown here. This DNA report consisted of swabbing various areas of the murder weapon found at the Lanza home, which was a .22 caliber Savage rifle. Other items swabbed included a Christmas card, an envelope labeled "For the young students of Sandyhook Elementary School," the adhesive side of the stamp, and the exterior and interior door handles of the car located at the crime scene. These items were then compared to the, quote, known blood of Nancy Lanza, unquote, and a liver swab from a person allegedly said to be Adam Lanza. The results from this report are shocking, to say the least. Based on the conclusions given by the forensic science examiner and analyst Eric Carita, both Nancy and Adam Lanza are eliminated as contributors to the DNA found on the following items. In fact, the only items swabbed that could be connected to an Adam Lanza are mixtures. Now, a DNA mixture is a given sample that contains the DNA of more than one individual. If you were thinking that Nancy Lanza's DNA would be one of the individuals included in the mixture, you would be wrong. Nancy Lanza was eliminated as a contributor to all of the aforementioned items. Now, given these facts, many questions now are raised. How could there be more than one person's DNA found at the crime scene when, according to the official report, Adam Lanza acted alone? Was the DNA contaminated? If so, how could there be any conclusive results? Astonishingly still, on January 7, 2013, a hit was obtained with the convicted offender DNA profile from the New York State Police Investigation Center for the letter entitled "For the Young Children of Sandyhook Elementary School." Who is this New York convict, and what are his connections to the school, and to Adam and Nancy Lanza for that matter? Was there ever a follow-up? This seems as if it should be treated with the utmost importance. So why was it swept under the rug, hidden in a 6,700-page pile, and never addressed publicly? How can we believe this official report when the forensic analyst himself concludes that both Nancy and Adam Lanza are eliminated as contributors to the DNA found at the crime scene? You have to ask yourself, what exactly is going on here? We attempted to find an answer when an email was sent to forensic science examiner Eric Carita. In a portion of the email, Mr. Carita was asked the following. Quote, would your conclusions indicate any of the following? 1. Adam Lanza was not the shooter. 2. Adam Lanza did not work alone. 3. There was definitely somebody else involved. Was there any follow-up regarding the convict from New York and his possible involvement? Who he is, and if your findings resulted in him becoming a suspect? Do you know the contents of what was found inside the envelope and why it was crucial to the investigation? The report states that the DNA sample of Adam Lanza was taken from his liver. Is this common procedure? Were you ever brought into contact with the shooter's body, or was the liver swab the only source of Lanza's DNA? Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you. Unquote. We have yet to receive a response from Mr. Carita. However, there has been one update during the production of this video. A Freedom of Information request has been granted to News Channel 8 of Connecticut regarding the letter to the young children of Sandy Hook. Although the convict from New York is still unknown, this is what we are now being told.
David, how did you even learn this letter existed?
And it was mentioned in the Sandyhook report released about a year ago, but that report really gave no information about it. Tonight, we have a photocopy of that letter, and it's addressed to the students of Sandy Hook, sent days after the shooting. A mysterious message claiming to be an apology from the father of the shooter. It was referenced in one of the thousands of pages in the Sandyhook report, a report criticized for leaving out too much. It took a Freedom of Information request from the News 8 investigators and a complaint to the Freedom of Information Commission to get our hands on the contents of the envelope. A day before a scheduled hearing, the state police asked us to pull back our complaint. They would just give it to us. Police tested it for fingerprints and DNA. It did not come from Peter Lanza, as the envelope says. They tested it for Adam Lanza's DNA. Police say it didn't match him either. The only match they found was an unnamed felon in New York who they believe licked the envelope.
This still does not explain why Adam Lanza's DNA was not found on various items at the Lanza home, or why there were DNA mixtures found on those items despite there being only 2 alleged people in the house. Nancy Lanza was eliminated as a contributor to all aforementioned items. Moving on to the DNA found at Sandyhook School, we arrive at amended supplemental DNA report 6. Here we find even more bizarre information. This report includes all of the weapons and magazines Lanza allegedly carried in the school. Strangely, it is permanent substitute teacher Lauren Rousseau's DNA, not Lanza's, which is found on the pistol grip of the rifle, shoulder stock of the rifle, feed area inside of the magazine, the Glock magazine, 9mm Sig Sauer magazine, PMag magazine, and 13 cartridges. Even stranger yet, of the 27 results found in this report, all but 3 are mixtures. The only unredacted DNA source that is distinctly listed alone is that of Principal Dawn Hochsprung. In result number 18, it clearly states the results are consistent with Dawn Hochsprung being the source of the DNA profile from item number 59S1, a 10mm auto cartridge. Now if we move to the supplemental DNA report 5, we see that this same item number, 59S1, was matched up to an Adam Lanza. Surprisingly though, Lanza's DNA was eliminated as a contributor to that specific item. Now if that wasn't odd enough for you, according to this same report, he was also eliminated as a contributor to the DNA found on the stock area and forearm of the shotgun shells, and various magazines and cartridges. The shotgun, if you recall, was found in the trunk of the Honda Civic. That very Honda Civic's interior and exterior door handles were also swabbed, but once again, Lanza's DNA was nowhere to be found. He was, however, said to be included as a source for a Sig Sauer magazine, and item number 58S1, a different 10mm cartridge. The suicide weapon he allegedly used contained a DNA mixture. Now as you can see, by cross-referencing the various DNA reports, nothing seems to add up. Adam Lanza's name, for example, appears in most DNA reports, but disappears from report 6. Why would he be redacted? And why do we find Lauren Rousseau's DNA on so many items? As one blogger states, it is understandable that body fluids of victims could come into contact with the weapons carried by the murderer. It stretches credibility when that same DNA is found on bullets inside of loaded magazines. Was the supplemental DNA report deliberately designed to confuse and beguile the public in an effort to cover up the truth? If not, what are we supposed to make of these anomalous findings? The forensic science examiner is silent, so we can't expect to find an answer there. We could ask the lead Sandyhook investigator from the Western District Crime Squad, but he, William Podgorski, age 49, died suddenly of an undisclosed illness. Lieutenant Paul Vance has proven he's unreliable, as he provided the public with false information as to where the gunman was found. In a CBS interview, he quite matter-of-factly stated that the gunman was found in the hallway. However, we learn he was supposedly found in the classroom.
And where was the gunman found?
In the hallway.
Outside of the classroom.
Correct.
Perhaps the press would help investigate these seemingly blatant inconsistencies. However, they have proven as well to be silent on such issues. The organization Able Child stated it best. Prior to the release of the investigative report, the Courant was all over the shooting at Sandy Hook, but has failed to report on investigative details that scream for answers. It's one thing for lawmakers to ignore investigative material, but when a leading press organization blatantly fails to report on important investigative details, the people of the state truly are not being served. And finally, with all of the inconsistencies and lies surrounding the event, how can we be certain if DNA samples from the crime scene were really processed? Judging by the few unredacted photos we have of Classroom 8, the classroom in which 2 adults and 15 children were allegedly murdered, we see no evidence whatsoever of a massacre. The first 2 photos are images taken just inside the classroom. The last 3 were taken after the interior had been cleared. In the end, it is difficult to come to any accurate conclusion of what the anomalous supplemental DNA report suggests. And if public officials like Vance really do view themselves as masters, then we the people, in their eyes, are the servants and don't deserve answers. If nothing else, That is what has to change.
The now famous images of the students being led away from the Sandyhook school by educators and law enforcement personnel were captured by Shannon Hicks. Her photos of the student evacuation were some of the first images shared with the broadcast media and became front-page news on papers around the world. Before these pictures were released to the AP and other media hubs, Shannon made a slideshow of some of these images and uploaded her slideshow to the Newtown B YouTube account. This video went live on December 14th, 2012. Now, according to Hicks, she took these photos at approximately 10:09 a.m. on December 14, 2012. Many researchers have pointed out numerous inconsistencies in Shannon's snapshots, including various wardrobe anomalies, parking lot inconsistencies. In an effort to pinpoint the exact time that these photos were taken, I decided to examine the EXIF metadata of Shannon's photos. Finding versions of her images with intact metadata was daunting, as all available versions of her images are copies of the originals. However, Hicks shared her story and a few of her photos with Time.com. The photos Shannon gave to Time in her exclusive interview contained lots of EXIF data, but what that data tells us only adds to the suspicion that her photos might have been staged. If we examine two of her most important evacuation images, we see that they're claimed to be taken on December 14, 2012. The metadata on one of these images says that it was taken at 12 a.m., and another says it was taken at 6:10 p.m. All of these Time.com images have wildly different capture times. These times seem anomalous if this event were really taking place right in front of her camera. Looking into the metadata further, we find that these images have been manipulated in Adobe Photoshop CS5 for Macintosh on December 19th at 5:30 p.m. This fact alone invalidates the metadata timestamps, as all metadata can be manipulated to the artist's liking using Adobe Photoshop CS5. Which brings us back to Shannon's slideshow on the Newtown B YouTube account. Perhaps by examining the metadata of this video, we can come up with a more accurate picture of when these images first went online. When looking into her video's metadata, something very shocking immediately stands out. Her video was created on December 13, 2012 at 5:44 p.m. Eastern Time. How could it be that this video was uploaded and encoded on December 13th if the photos within that video were supposedly taken the following morning? Similarly, John Voquette, an associate editor at the Newtown B, captured a short clip of the purported chaos behind the firehouse, which he also uploaded to the Newtown B's YouTube account.
Ambulances and paramedics are being dispatched in from as far away as Waterbury and the Waterbury region. Got parents standing by. The chairman of the school board, W. Lideline, is here. Multiple school personnel, ambulance, and state police and others from throughout the location, throughout the region here at Sandyhook School for this still developing incident. We have no idea firmly what's going on yet. We have SWAT, emergency services here from the state of Connecticut, armed and moving into the area. We have no other firm information, confirmation of injuries, victims, or any information beyond that there was an incident that possibly involved a shooting, and that we are still standing by for firm information or a press briefing.
The metadata for this video also shows it was created on December 13th. This is very strong evidence that these images were taken before the event, maybe in a drill or dress rehearsal situation, in preparation for the FEMA false flag terrorism event, better known as the Sandyhook hoax.
So jump for joy for Sandyhook elementary janitor named Rick Thorne, who did a Paul Revere run through the hallways after spotting the gunman shouting, "A gunman is coming, a gunman is coming." He checked to make sure the classroom doors were locked. I'm going to talk about Rick Thorne and some of the discrepancies found in relation to him and early statements that were made. And these early statements that were made are very important. They're what came out before any editing and auditing has been done. Where you can find the most truth is in the early footage, when you compare to what we have information that's been given out almost 2 years later. When you go back and compare, it's almost insane. I got this photo from Sandyhook hoax page from Tony. This is who Tony believes to be Rick Thorne. I found another picture myself attached to the name Rick Thorne. They look similar but not identical to each other. But we can't say for sure because, and this is the most suspicious thing about Rick Thorne, is that he has never ever been interviewed.
Town Police Dispatcher. Okay, I have that. We have officers on scene.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Rick Thorne.
Okay.
I'm in the building.
All right, Rick, I've got you. I'm on the other line. All right. We have officers there. Thank you.
Church at Sandyhook Center. Full crew.
Newtown 911, what's the location of your emergency? Hello?
Are you talking to me?
I am talking to you. Okay, is this Rick?
12 Dickinson Drive, Sandyhook.
Hi, Rick, is this you?
Yes.
Okay, we're back on the line together. Was that by PD? What was it?
By the firehouse. It's by the firehouse.
Yeah, we know. We got. I'm sorry. All right, Rick, you still with me?
Yes.
All right, what do you see now?
I'm standing in the corridor. There's a watching his corridor.
All right, you're watching your corridor?
Yes.
Okay.
Next to Peter or Ryan Lanza, Rick Thorne would be the #1 guy the media would go after for an interview. Here we have the Sandyhook Elementary School Handbook for the year of 2010-2011. Rick Thorne's name is listed here, and this is a very huge piece of evidence. If Rick Thorne, someone might say they went back and added it, it's on their web page, and that probably could be done. But if they went to the trouble to add Rick Thorne's name, who should not have been employed at that time, we'll get to that here. He was still working in Massachusetts at that time. You know, if they went in to add Rick Thorne, why did they not correct Kevin Ancelotti's name? He's listed here as Antonelli, head custodian, instead of Ancelotti. So the fact that they added him after the fact doesn't make sense either. My belief is this whole handbook was fudged and created. So we have a newsletter here dated August 28, 2012, and this lists Rick Thorne, Kevin Ancelotti, and a couple other names worked tirelessly to prepare our school for its opening day. So this is for the school year of 2012. Next, we'll get into this article dated November 19, 2012. Rick Thorne worked as a custodian in Chelmsford, Massachusetts for 22 years, earning $20 an hour cleaning floors, cutting grass, setting up assemblies for the community. He's currently on retirement pension, getting $1,500 a month. And further in the article, it says Greenwood, whose wife has cancer, and Thorne still don't have new jobs 16 months later. So he was fired in June of 2011. In June of 2011, he was still working for Kempsville school system. Why is he in the 2010-11 handbook? This does not make sense. And it says 16 months later, he still doesn't have a new job. This takes us to November of 2012, that he still doesn't have a job, according to this article. So why is he in Dawn's newsletter in August? None of this lines up. This is a comment from a thread on Godlight Productions, and it's a very well-written comment, so I'm going to share this about more discrepancies involving Thorne. The Rick Thorne call, divided into 4 sections in the released 911 recordings, is extremely problematic for the conventional Sandyhook narrative. Burton and others have Thorne accosting the gunmen before they even have time to call 911, yelling at him to stop shooting and put the gun down. Abby Clement states that when she entered the northwest hall of the school, Thorne had already run past her position towards the front lobby, some 20-30 yards away. Thus, Clements has Thorne in the lobby only moments after the shooting began within the school. Yet, on the 911 call attributed to Thorne, he merely states, "I believe there's a shooting at the front glass. Something, I don't know what, is going on." If Thorne had really run through the lobby to go eyeball to eyeball with a gunman and order him to drop his weapon, then purported content of this call makes absolutely no sense. I don't know, I keep hearing popping, are not the words of a man who had just gone toe-to-toe with a mass murderer discharging a .223 Bushmaster inside a school. Also, how can one explain Thorne's omission of having seen the mangled bodies of Dawn Hochsprung and Mary Sherlock after passing them in the lobby while running through the biggest puddle of blood ever? As in almost always the case with recounts of Sandy Hook incident, it is difficult to determine who is the liar. If call 1 was placed by Barbara Halstead, then Cox, Roig, Day, and Halstead's daughter are liars. If this call from Thorne is legitimate, then Clemens, Burton, Penna, Day are liars. Who is the deceptive party here, Thorne or the others? Or are they all liars, obfuscating participants in an event that is essentially a sham? Did this call attributed to Thorne even take place in real time? I don't know where the truth actually lies, but once again, the call attributed to Thorne is extremely problematic. And there's more. There's this next article. I have found a big discrepancy with what custodian Rick Thorne says one of the dead staff in the hallway, either Dawn Hochsprung or Mary Sherlock, was wearing versus what the official report says the principal/psychologist wore. Rick said one of them was wearing an orange dress. Lastly, Thorne related that as he was being escorted out of the school, he observed 2 adult females lying in the hallway by the office. Thorne stated that they were near a bench and they both appeared shot. Moreover, Thorne stated that he did not recognize them, but he did notice that one of the females was wearing an orange dress. His testimony was taken December 14, 2012 at 12:51 hours, so it would have been fresh on his mind. Now, notice, in the scene report, a detailed description of both Dawn and Mary are given their deceased state in the hallway. Guess what? Both are wearing jeans and not a dress. And here's the specifics. Mrs. Hochsprung had brown hair and was wearing a gray and red hooded sweater, red long sleeve shirt, blue jeans, and a calf-length brown colored boots. Miss Sherlock was wearing a blue long-sleeve shirt, tan tank top shirt, blue jeans, blue socks with a brown-colored shoes. There was a pair of eyeglasses on the floor east of her body. There was a blue-colored material around her head that was possibly a headdress or large neck scarf. So, who is lying? Anyone see a problem with this? Moving on. Those are all huge. I'm going to share this from the Town of Chelmsford Annual Town Report, fiscal year of 2011. School employee payroll has Thorne listed here with a salary of $50,640.37. So that was his yearly salary. I'm going to share this as well. This is a Spokeo record connected to Chelmsford Rick Thorne on Gorham Street. I did not find a specific number address for Gorham Street, but I snooped around a little bit. There's this weird article about bones found at 54 Gorham Street. I'm not going to share details of that right now, but I'll show that that address sold November 14th, 2012 for $1. So that's a month prior to the events of Sandyhook. There's another 38 Gorham Street that sold for $1 listed here on December 28, 2012, so 2 weeks after the event. This clip here, this screenshot shows 3 $1 houses listed on December 27, 2012. 46 Gorham, 42 Gorham, and 38 Gorham Street, all sold 13 days after the events of Sandyhook. And then another $1 sale on February 18, 2013 on that street. So like I said, I don't have specific address and I can't tie Thorne to any of those. I just thought it was interesting enough to share. This Glenn Beck article here talks about courage and inspiration in Newtown. CT overcomes tragedy. This little clip from the Glenn Beck article says, one of the staff members at Sandyhook took up a collection for Rick Thorne and his family and gave him a gift certificate he could use for books for his 3 daughters in college. Well, this throws me off of the trail that I was on because the person I thought to be the identity that I followed for Rick Thorne in records like Advanced Background, Intellius, to show who his family are and to try to find more on him, would be a dead end if he has 3 daughters, because the records that I found for the Chelmsford Rick Thorne has 1 daughter and 1 son, both adults, daughter married. I'm not sure 100% what the correct trail is for Thorne because we have nothing on him. There's been nothing shared on him other than what the media has put out in the 911 calls. So thank you for your interest in Sandyhook. Take care.
The media may not have simply overlooked the discrepancies in the case of Sandy Hook. Outlets like CNN and others seemed to, in a few instances, fully participate in the deception. Take, for instance, a CNN piece from just a few days after the event. To quote from the article, "Scuba was clipping hair on Friday at Robert Anthony's hair salon, the shop he, his mom, and sister have run for the last 13 years. Because this case was so devoid of fruitful leads for reporters to follow, it's not unexpected for them to resort to a war of sensationalism. In this example, the reporter, Wayne Drash, attempted to portray Adam Lanza as a deeply disturbed individual. Let's watch for a moment.
Owner of the Robert Anthony Salon in Newtown says Adam Lanza was silent and never made eye contact when he'd come in with his mother for his regular haircut.
I would always make jokes with him, trying to talk to him, and just make conversation with him, cutting his hair. He wouldn't say a word. He wouldn't look down from the tile. He wouldn't look up.
Even though Lanza was in his teens, Scuba says his mother appeared firmly in control.
The only time that he would move or make any type of movement is when his mother told him to. That was it. And those were the only times.
The man whose comments we were just treated to is Robert A. Scuba. The article refers to him 13 times as a barber, and his comments were about cutting the young Adam Lanza's hair. Scuba puts his hand on the black barber chair. That sick son of a... The barber shakes his head. The barber's sister would tell him there was something wrong with Lanza, that he wasn't right. So, I guess he's a barber somewhere in the Newtown area. The first problem with the story is there's no business licensed as Robert Anthony's hair salon in the area. But a person by the name of Robert A. Scuba Sr. is listed as doing business as Design Crete USA. So that part of the story checks out. While we're at it, let's see if Bob Scuba is a licensed barber. Barbers are required to be licensed after all. It appears that no barber with the last name Scuba has been licensed in the state of Connecticut since at least 1997. That's odd. The article seemed to overemphasize that Bob was a barber. Let's try another tactic and see if Bob might actually be a hairdresser. We do get a listing for Robert Scuba. Let's see the details for that listing. It shows his license is inactive and expired on August 31st, 2008. But the article stated, Scuba was clipping hair on Friday at Robert Anthony's hair salon. How's that possible if Bob's license expired as far back as 2008? Let's check on the license for the salon itself. Checking under Design Crete USA, its DBA, we get one result. It says it's inactive. Well, what do you know? It expired on December 31st, 2012. So it was a licensed salon on the 19th when the reporter made his visit, but it never renewed its license when it expired just a few days later and almost 2 years ago. I don't know about the owner of the salon, whether it's still in operation or under what name it might currently be licensed, but I think it's a fair assumption to make that the comments made by Robert Scuba were strictly for effect only. Did he ever cut the hair of a person named Adam Lanza even once? I doubt it. I'll conclude this line of investigation with another quote from the CNN article. I wish I would have killed him then, he says. Or he should have killed himself a long time ago. He would have saved us all the trouble. He should have run in front of a bus or some other type of terrible death. He should have done it to himself. It would have saved all those kids and parents the trouble. I should have slipped and stabbed him by accident. It would have been a lot better for those people.
There is very little video footage from the day of the event. The video footage that we do see is chock full of anomalies. Based on these anomalies, many people have come to the conclusion that what we are seeing is evidence of a drill rather than that of a mass shooting. So let's take a look at a few examples so you could judge for yourself. Scanning the scene of the incident, we observed that Dickinson Drive, the road between the firehouse and Sandyhook School, is completely blocked off. Trapped from going either forward or backward, the lone ambulance on Dickinson is practically useless. All other ambulances are parked at the firehouse, away from the crime scene, and are all facing the same direction. By 10:29 a.m., under an hour after the onset of the event, ambulances and even small quads were inaccessible, as evidenced by 408's transmission, stating, "I can't get the quad up here, the road's blocked too much." Gridlock was a major issue, and Maureen Will, who just so happens to live directly across the street from the firehouse, was the Newtown Director of Emergency Communications, and was at the helm during the event. In a shocking admission, Miss Will admits gridlock was an issue, stating that surrounding law enforcement agencies self-deployed, resulting in gridlock on Riverside Road, forcing her to place another local fire station on standby, because the trucks at Sandyhook were completely blocked in. Gridlock can also be attributed to having the reunification point at the firehouse just a few hundred feet away from the school, thus clogging the streets with any potential parents attempting to pick up their child. At the school, there is no evidence of a chaotic scene. There is a fire truck that was granted access, but curiously, there are no ambulances. Now note, it has been established through matching the highly questionable police report and the police and fire department scanner feeds with the aerial feed that we arrived at a time frame between 10:36 and 11 a.m., and that's for the helicopter footage that we see. Also take note that if we believe the official story, Nurse Sally Cox and Secretary Barbara Halstead hid in a closet in the exact same area where the state police were conducting the investigation until 1:15 p.m. for approximately 4 hours. So why is this important? It's important because this proves that not everyone was accounted for at the time of the aerial footage. Yet we see blocked ambulances, gridlock, and zero sense of urgency. Emphasizing the lack of urgency even more, let's take a look at this police dashcam video. At 12:21 p.m., just under an hour prior to Sally Cox and Barbara Halstead coming out of the closet, no pun intended of course, these officers decided it was a good idea to bust out the snacks, chips, bananas, and bottled water during a mass shooting investigation. Mind you, deceased innocent little first graders are allegedly just feet away from the vehicle, but somehow they were able to stomach and ingest food and beverages. These are the same officers who received millions of dollars in compensation from the federal government for healing. For instance, August 28, 2013, the Washington Times reported that the federal government would send $2.5 million in taxpayer money to Connecticut police agencies to help the community heal. On June 17, 2014, the Obama administration dished out another $7.1 million to Newtown's first responders, victims' families, and law enforcement. The obvious question here is, why would law enforcement need extra enormous sums of money for simply doing their job? But even more bizarre is the fact that these officers were able to take a break in the action, while some people were yet to be accounted for. Many people have wondered if gridlock was deliberately done to prevent certain EMTs who weren't in the know from going into the school. After all, it wasn't until 10 a.m. when a meeting occurred between Sergeant Cario and Danbury Director of Emergency Medical Services Matthew Casavecchia took place. Up until this point, nobody, except for certain members of law enforcement, were allowed inside. In the end, not one EMT, outside of any law enforcement agents who may or may not have assessed any alleged victims, was allowed in until it was too late. Matthew Casavecchia and his two accomplices were brought in after the fact. And other EMTs, such as 44-year-old EMT James Wolfe, gave helpless statements saying, quote, "It was difficult to see, and especially because we weren't in action doing things trying to save people. You may not be able to save everybody, but you damn well try. And when we didn't have the opportunity to put our skills into action, it's difficult," unquote. And Sophia Smallstorm, in her memorable presentation on Sandy Hook, outlined how ludicrous it was to not have attempted all measures in rescuing children from the school.
While we did see stark tarps on the day of Sandy Hook, they were empty. The white mounds you see in these pictures are actually emergency gear. Ambulance crews learned that no bodies were coming out. They would be kept in the building to which only the police had access. Ambulances were made to wait down the street at the firehouse. This is what was posted on an internet forum about the emergency response at Sandy Hook. I'm going to read it to you. The main sticking point is the EMS services did not behave within their normal scope. A mass shooting would have had trauma helicopters flying children out one after another, performing CPR the entire way to the hospital, and patients would be declared dead at the hospital after extensive measures were taken to try to save lives. I've been in the ER for 5 years, and we get all code blue patients. We get 80-year-old nursing home patients that have not been breathing for 20 minutes, with no chance of survival. And we perform CPR and necessary medical intervention with the chance that patients may regain a pulse.
On that horrible day on Friday, you guys were assigned to a triage area, and it didn't unfortunately end up being used. That must have been just a sickening feeling to be there at this triage unit and then realize there's not people coming in.
At the time, a few times during the incident, I actually thought to myself, should I be hoping that this area was filled with injured people?
Despite the fact that there was acknowledgement of gridlock, blocked ambulances, and perhaps evidence of negligence, at the time of this production, there is yet to be even a single lawsuit made by the parents of the alleged victims. Now, there are plenty of reasons why people think Sandy Hook was a drill gone live. Remember the footage of the parents walking aimlessly at the firehouse?
All right, it gets really interesting in a minute, and you're going to see, without a doubt, how the people are recycling back into the building. All right, now the helicopter's pulling out. See the line of people there? See the line of people? All right, we're coming up to the front. Look how they're coming back in. They're taking that turn. Watch them take the turn. Up. And they're coming right back into the building.
Now, skeptics erroneously have attempted to denounce this evidence as manufactured and looped by YouTubers. Yet, as we can see, before the helicopter video pans out, the people are just filing right back into the firehouse. Yes, arrows were given out by various YouTubers to show the characters looping around. And yes, songs were attributed to the edited versions of the videos to clearly show how ludicrous it all is. And yes, the video is played forward and backward right before it pans out to show clearly where the people are headed. But this tape, quite clearly, is not looped, and we can clearly see people walking in circles. When we focus on individual people in the video, we see the same anomalous behavior. The kid in the yellow Under Armour shirt is the best example of this. Throughout the time he is observed, he just walks aimlessly around, in circles. He does this until a lady walks up to him and ushers him away. Now, did this lady notice that he was a little too blatant in his attempt at creating a chaotic scene? Now take a look at the man in the gray sweatshirt. His name is Joseph Wasick, and his daughter Alexis gave several interviews to the media throughout the day. He enters the video at around 50 seconds in when he exits the firehouse door and then walks around. He is seen again going back inside the firehouse at about 4 minutes and 10 seconds into the video, and then at the end of the video he is seen exiting the building once again at around 10:21 into the video. If you pay close attention to the individual people in the footage, you will notice the same awkward behavior of walking in and out of the firehouse doors, of course without a child. And to clear up any confusion you may have about the dashcam videos and the lack of evidence of a mass evacuation, let's take a look at the police report. In report number 000-56732, the John McGeever dashcam timeline, it states that, quote, "The following is a timeline of pertinent events that were captured by the video recorder and observed and recorded by me while watching this DVD, signed by Allison Peters. It is a video of a forward-facing view from the cruiser of the school parking lot and captures the northeast corner of the building. Now, the northeast corner of the building just so happens to be where the majority of the alleged evacuations took place. Remember, the officer claims to have watched the video and observed the mass evacuation, yet we never see it in the video. These are blatant lies. The issue with Sandyhook is the abundance of redactions and the total lack of visual and video evidence pointing to a real mass shooting. We are told many tales of what happened, but how can we trust the Connecticut State Police when they have been proven to be liars? We are told that 25 of the bodies weren't even worth rushing to a hospital. We are told that only 3 EMTs were allowed access into the school to assess the dozens of bodies located inside. Everybody else was ordered to stand off. We were told that these bodies were left to rot in the school all day long. We were told by Peter Lanza, of all people, via the New Yorker, that his son could barely tie his own shoe at the age of 17. Yet this uncoordinated, mentally challenged kid was able to accomplish the unthinkable within just minutes. The police report states that Lanza, after he was done with his rampage, piled dead bodies in a bathroom. Before this, the police report states that he aimed his gun at each person before he shot them, not saying anything, but meticulously pointing. He was able to do this and fire off 150 rounds within just minutes, killing 26 people. Is it any wonder that people question the official story?
Hello to everybody out there. My name on YouTube is Professor Doom, and I want to take a moment right now to thank you all who have shown and expressed interest in this subject, one of the biggest hoaxes that have ever been perpetrated on the American public, and that is the events that took place December 14th, 2012 at Sandyhook, Connecticut. I wish to thank those who've asked me to participate in the collaboration of this video, And for those of you who have seen my videos on this particular subject, I will be covering a few of the findings that I have discovered and I have presented in previous videos, but I represent here in this collaboration for you all, and I will get to that here right now for you. I'd like to share with you here a little bit of my background so you can understand why I took on the project of making videos regarding the Sandy Hook hoax, and you'll get a better understanding of what experience I've had in the matters of studying police documents and police reports. I took a paralegal course and have written many briefs. I have written federal lawsuits, state tort actions, one amicus curiae, and for those of you who do not know what an amicus curiae is, it is a friend of the court brief. I have also done several petition for habeas corpus motions. With my experience in studying police reports in writing up some of my habeas corpus petitions, that's what got me interested in the Sandy Hook documents that were provided for researchers and people who were just expressing interest in the subject of the Sandy Hook event. So, let me get on now with my very first document here that I want to show you. This document here is from the Connecticut State Police. And you will be able to see here in their reports, and a lot of these reports were just from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Connecticut State Police was reporting what the FBI had reported to them. And in this report here, it goes on to state thus: the shooter schooling began at Sandy Hook Elementary School and moved on to Newtown Middle School for 5th and 7th grades. Around 7th grade, the shooter moved to St. Mary's School and then moved to Newtown High School, where he completed 9th grade. Okay, so I'm going to stop there on this document, and I want you to take notice that nowhere in this document does it ever mention anything about the school St. Rose of Lima. And as you can see here, that they make it quite clear that Adam Lanza, the shooter, had attended Sandy Hook Elementary School. We can see in this document here, this is an official police document that was provided for researchers. And they go on to state here that on March 6, 2013, this detective met with 4 individuals who had worked or who has or have worked at Sandy Hook School for an extensive period of time. Furthermore, they worked at the school when the shooter attended. Through the memory of the aforementioned yearbooks and a Sandy Hook school map, were able to obtain which classrooms the shooter was in while he attended Sandy Hook School. With those 2 documents alone, you would get the sense that Adam Lanza did in fact attend Sandy Hook Elementary School. Yet there appears to be conflicting documents with the 2 documents that I just presented to you right there. And in the first document that differs from that account is this one right here. This document here was written up by Rachel Van Ness after they requested permission from Adam Lanza's father, Peter Lanza, to obtain all school records for Adam Lanza from Newtown, Connecticut. And the only school that is mentioned here or in any other documents where records were to be obtained, and the only school listed is St. Rose of Lima School, and it states here, number 355, St. Rose of Lima School records pertaining to Adam Lanza. Didn't we just see in the very first document that I presented that the only schools that were mentioned were Sandy Hook, Newtown Middle, St. Mary's, and the high school? There is no mention in that document at all that Adam Lanza ever attended St. Rose of Lima School. So why is it that they are making the claim that he attended Sandy Hook when this document and Peter Lanza refute that claim? And they are specifically requesting school attendance records for St. Rose of Lima only and no other school at all. Now I want to show you the next document. And I want to remind you, I've poured through every document that they presented for researchers. And we're talking over 1,000 of these documents. And the only document that reports an official request by subpoena for the school records of Adam Lanza was made to St. Rose of Lima. St. Rose of Lima school records, subpoena served. On 1/2/2013, I served Principal Mary Rose Maloney with a subpoena for Adam Lanza's school records. And they claim that they did in fact receive the school records. How come in none of these documents is there any request by subpoena for the school records of Adam Lanza from Sandyhook Elementary, from Newtown Middle School, or from any other school for that matter? Only this one. And that seems to be in complete contradiction to the document stating by the Connecticut State Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation that Adam Lanza attended Sandyhook Elementary School.
Most of you watching this are aware that the purported shooter, Adam Lanza, had an older brother, Ryan Lanza. Ryan was reported to be employed by the accounting firm Ernst & Young at the time of the Sandyhook incident. I touched on Ryan earlier, just briefly, but it's worth learning a bit more about him as it relates to another anomaly. To begin with, the initial reports of the Sandyhook event cited anonymous sources as claiming the perpetrator was one Ryan Lanza.
The gunman was identified at 11:28 as, again, 24-year-old Ryan Lanza of New Jersey.
They're also going to locations associated with the shooter, not just directly associated with Ryan Lanza, his residence, and they're looking for a location in New Jersey there.
Cops have identified the shooter as a 24-year-old man, Ryan Lanza.
We have just now confirmed apparently the shooter is identified. He is 20-year-old Ryan Lanza.
The shooter, it is Ryan Lanza. Ryan Lanza is the shooter.
The shooter has been identified to me by a source as Ryan Lanza. Ryan Lanza.
A short time later, the media accounted for this discrepancy by claiming the ID was made by identifying documents on the deceased shooter. Apparently, Adam was carrying Ryan's driver's license for some unexplained reason. Some accounts claim it was Ryan himself that suggested Adam might have his ID. Others who were following the story in those first few days remember reading about Ryan's reaction to being identified as the shooter. The following posts were made to his Facebook account.
Everyone shut the fuck up. It wasn't me. I'm on the bus home now. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was at work. It wasn't me. Fuck you, CNN. It wasn't me.
These reactions are not unusual considering the unlucky situation Ryan appeared to have been in. Not to mention that, following the media's false report, Ryan reportedly received a number of death threats through social media. Ryan was reportedly living with either his girlfriend or a roommate in Hoboken, New Jersey, while Adam reportedly lived with his mother, Nancy. Ryan reportedly stated he hadn't seen or spoken to his younger brother in about 3 years at the time of the event. Later, on the day of the supposed shooting, Ryan was taken into custody for what they claimed was his own protection. I can't locate anywhere in the official report details of an interview between Ryan and law enforcement officials. However, there are Hoboken police and FBI records that contain some details of the arrest of Ryan and a very detailed interview from the day of the event, but the name of who's being interviewed is redacted. Still, because the details given are so specific and appeared to come from someone with intimate knowledge of the Lanza family, it's a fair assumption that the person being interviewed is Ryan. Another document refers to one of the interviewees on that day having an alibi. Someone that morning had made a purchase at a Dunkin' Donuts using their credit card, which from their use of the word alibi seems to have satisfied investigators that they were not directly involved in the shooting. It's worth noting that there were other unusual reports in those first few days, including that he lived with his father, Peter Lanza, that his girlfriend and a friend were missing, and that his father was found dead in his home, but not his home in Stamford, a home in Hoboken. Outside of the initial blitz of Facebook posts and the media's reporting of Ryan in those first few days, nothing else about Ryan has been reported. Sure, there have been blogs posting questions like, "What happened to Ryan?" or "Is Ryan still in custody?" But nothing has been reported about Ryan's current status. Does he still work for Ernst & Young? Does he still live in Hoboken? Has anyone seen or heard from him in recent months? Even more unusual is that Ryan himself hasn't emerged to give a statement. Even if Ryan were concerned about what line of questioning he might face if he were to present himself to the media, he could have simply issued a statement or arranged for an interview under tightly controlled conditions. The bizarre mix of reports, statements, and details pertaining to Ryan and Adam are too numerous to cover in depth in this report. But just working with the elements I've presented, I'm sure you would have difficulty trying to piece together a storyline that could account for most of the details and false reports. There appears to be some kind of deception going on here, but exactly what that is, I can't speculate. Which brings me to one of the more interesting theories having emerged in the ensuing months that attempts to account for at least some of these anomalies. It is being speculated by some that the persons being reported as Adam and Ryan Lanza are actually the same person. Having researched this case since the day of the event, I admit that I cannot refute the theory and remain open to it. Most who posit the theory speculate that Ryan was once named Adam and changed his name sometime around 2009. Still, others simply theorize that Adam never existed at all, a theory that, if true, would pose a real problem for authorities involved in the case. This, the last of my 3 segments, though, is about a strange event that occurred in late December of 2012 relating to Ryan. Sometime soon after the shooting event on the 14th, a Facebook account was created that purported to be that of Ryan Lanza. Subsequent to that, a reporter from the New York Post contacted the account holder, which somehow led to what the New York Post reported as a Facebook interview. The Post wasted no time in running with the story and reported some of what was said by Ryan.
I'm a victim. I lost my mom and brother. I will miss you, bro. I will always love you as long as I live.
They reported that Ryan posted a picture of Adam with the following message: "Rest in peace, Adam Peter Lanza." The problem with all of this is that it was a complete hoax. Ryan had reportedly shut down his Facebook account almost immediately after the event. Countless Facebook and other social media pages were then created by persons other than Ryan. Just days after the Post ran their story, they were contacted by Errol Cockfield of the public relations firm Edelman, which happens to be the world's largest public relations firm. Acting as a spokesperson for the Lanza family, he issued a statement on their behalf that chalked the whole thing up to the unfortunate result of a poor editorial process. Boy, that's putting it mildly. Thanks to the New York Post, other publications picked up their story, including Huffington Post, the UK Telegraph, TMZ, and others. They must have assumed, as many would, that editors at the Post had verified the reporter's story, especially in light of the hair-trigger reporting that had plagued the story just days earlier. What bothered some wasn't the fact that the Post screwed up and ran with a totally illegitimate story. It was the way in which they handled the recovery from their blunder. First, rather than retract the story and remove it from their website, they chose instead to simply update the story. In other words, they kept the full text of the totally fabricated story and simply noted that it was a hoax, to which, when read, would prompt the reader to ask, "Why the hell am I reading this?" The story remains plastered throughout the internet, linking back to the Post story as any reputable news outlet would. Next, the Post couldn't resist making a last-ditch effort to deflect the blame onto those who would shamelessly reprint their story. In the Metro section, they ran a brief update they called Twisted Fake on Facebook. The last sentence reads, "The bogus posts and instant message chats were reported by news outlets, including the Post," which implies they were no more responsible than any of their syndication partners. Someone needs to inform the author, Chuck Bennett, that the Post doesn't just reprint the work of others. Sometimes they break real scoops, even if it is all make-believe. If that all wasn't weird enough, there's the matter of the public relations firm that issued the statement denying that Ryan had any communication with the Post. As I mentioned, the firm Edelman was somehow retained by the Lanza family to handle this issue and potentially others. They are the largest PR firm, and their niche is big business, not representing two guys looking to maintain their privacy. Representing Edelman on behalf of the Lanzas is Errol Cockfield. Errol is an interesting character. He doesn't strike me as being the company's top agent, but he certainly has his share of sticky situations under his belt.
The woman that was mentioned in the Post piece today, when asked by a reporter from the Post, this $1,000 payment, did you work for, at any time did you work for Patterson? She said, no, I hardly know him. And yet there's a $1,000 payment to her. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I think this has been a very emotional time for some of the folks involved in these inquiries, and as I mentioned before, there's been an effort to sort of reconstruct history. You may not remember where you were in 2002, every period for the year 2002 or 2003.
He was press secretary to New York Governors Eliot Spitzer and David Patterson during periods of scandal for both. He was chief of staff to the New York State Democratic Conference and was press secretary for the Empire State Development Corporation, New York's primary economic development agency. Before his stints in government and PR, he was a reporter for 12 years and actually worked at the Hartford Courant. Let's wrap up this tangled mess with a brief quote from a blog called The Crisis Buzz, which featured Cockfield as a speaker at an event in 2013. Errol Cockfield is a vice president at Edelman, a global public relations firm, where he advises corporations on crisis and issues management. Cockfield specializes in developing strategic communications plans to mitigate risk, as well as proactive messaging to strengthen reputations. Assuming that Edelman has no need to service individuals like the Lanzas, I wonder which corporation Cockfield is advising behind the scenes.
What is the value of a human being, of a child, of a victim of tragedy? What makes the value of one person worth more than the value of another? When is enough enough? Sandyhook families have been compensated millions of dollars by the government. They have raised millions themselves through private charities and fundraisers. Others have donated tens of thousands of dollars, and yet, almost 2 years after the event, they are still asking for more. And they continue to receive more as well. What is it that makes them so different as to have become instant millionaires? If this event was real, do you think it is morally right to use the death of a family member in order to solicit annual goals of tens of thousands of dollars? Some families are even documented as having an annual goal of upwards of $500,000, and that's not counting government grants that they were awarded. Deaths occur every day in the United States. And just about every one of those families must deal with tragedy on their own, struggling to make ends meet. But we know Sandyhook is different, much different. After seeing all of the anomalies, inconsistencies, and lies surrounding the official story, one can't help but think that all the charities, funds, federal grants, and donations are just part of a gigantic payoff scheme. Take a look for yourself at the millions of dollars flowing into Newtown, and then make up your own mind as to what you think is going on.
When the president revealed his $500 million gun control plan in early 2013, he used Sandyhook as his justification. "Now is the time" was the motto. Background checks, the banning of high-capacity magazines and assault weapons, increased school security, and increased mental health services were the stated goals. The parents of the alleged victims walked hand in hand with this plan, using the exact same language as outlined in the proposal.
Now is the time to
Following
act.
the signing of the New York SAFE Act, the Firearms Safety Act, and the Connecticut Gun Control Bill, Connecticut, Maryland, and New York were the first three states to become affected by the plan, causing an outcry amongst citizens. In Connecticut, one man voiced his opinion louder than most.
I'm not here to cite crime statistics, lives saved with a gun, or the economic impact of the proposed asinine legislation, some of these gun control bills you have proposed. I will, however, read from the Connecticut State Constitution. Section 15 reads very clearly, we all know what the Second Amendment says, that Section 15 in the state constitution says very clearly, every citizen has a right to bear arms in defense of himself and the state. There's no registration, there's no permitting, there's no background checks. It's quite clear.
While most people are aware of the correlation between Sandyhook and gun control, many are cognizant of the mental health connection. Enter Adam Lanza, who, according to the state police report, had no clear motive for the alleged shooting spree. In an effort to fill an obvious void of intention, blame was placed on Lanza's claimed mental illness, despite the fact that no mental health records had been made public. A fact that didn't stop the media, politicians, Sandyhook parents, and the pharmaceutical industry from lobbying for and passing expensive mental health legislation. Confirmation on Lanza's mental health history is blurry at best. Lanza's stated primary psychiatrist, Dr. Paul Fox, was forced to surrender his license in July of 2012, after his place of employment became aware of ethics violations. He was discovered having sexual relations with clients while prescribing them with mind-altering drugs. After being highly dosed by Dr. Fox, one mother described her daughter as a walking zombie. Seems like a reliable source of information, doesn't he? Shortly after being fired, Dr. Fox fled the country to New Zealand. He gave his official statement on the Sandyhook investigation to the Connecticut State Police over the phone on December 17, 2012. A summary was given by the police explaining, quote, all of his medical records pertaining to clients he treated in the United States are currently in storage in the United States. Just one day later, Fox renounced his statement as he explained to police, quote, any medical records pertaining to Adam Lanza have been destroyed, since it has been over 5 years. The 5-year statute excuse that Dr. Fox used is false. The MedWatch organization Able Child found fault with this claim statute as they discovered, quote, According to the regulations of Connecticut State Agencies Medical Records 19A-14-42, unless specified otherwise herein, all parts of a medical record shall be retained for a period of 7 years from the last date of treatment. Questions surrounding Lanza's mental health are endless, not to mention his entire existence. So what do we actually know about Adam Lanza? Perhaps digging into his past life can lead to some sort of justification for the millions of dollars spent on mental health as a result of the event. But it seems as if his entire existence is shrouded in mystery. After 2009, there is very little trace of him at all. The younger pictures of the boy portrayed as Adam Lanza are of a joyful, smiling child, while the recent images issued out by the media are psychotic looking. The grainy, googly-eyed photos that we see appear to be altered to create the illusion of a deranged psychopath. There are unnatural straight-edge lines on the neck area. There are blurred-out areas near the mouth, and the googly-eyed effect is, well, a nice attempt at creating a mentally disturbed kid. Peter and Nancy divorced in 2009. At this time, Adam disappears from the radar, and his brother Ryan appears, causing many people to believe that Adam and Ryan are one and the same. Now, we can't say with any certainty that this is the case. Nonetheless, the media was careless at times and outright deceitful in their attempt to get an accurate portrayal of Adam. One example comes from the Joshua Flashman interview. Attempting to give motive to the shooting, Fox News reached out to Flashman, a native of Sandyhook, Monroe area, an aspiring actor, and who supposedly had inside information regarding the Lanzas. He was quoted by Fox News falsely stating that Nancy Lanza was a kindergarten teacher, and that she loved the kids more than she loved him, and that she was planning on having him committed. A nice attempt at creating motive. Shortly after the article was published, Flashman took to the comments section and his Twitter page to dispute how Fox portrayed him as an insider. He states the following: "I told the reporter about what was being said in the town, nothing more, nothing less. I told the reporter what the people in town were saying about Adam Lanza's motive, and next thing I know, I'm intimately acquainted with the Lanza family and knew Adam's motives firsthand. Funny, I didn't know that. Fox approached me and spent 2 days trying to convince me to go on the record, but I just wanted to get on TV, right?" Yes, this is how the media operated during the onset of the Sandyhook event. If there wasn't a clear motive, make it up. If someone spoke out on a subject, twist his or her words to create motive. Instead of reaching out to a second or third-hand source, one would think the media would go right to the source, Adam's father. Adam's father, Peter, has never given an on-camera interview. His only public testimony comes via the New Yorker, in an article entitled "The Reckoning" by Andrew Solomon. Allegedly, it was Peter who reached out to Solomon, saying that he was finally ready for an interview. So why Andrew Solomon of all people? One would think that every news agency in the land would be foaming at the mouth to get the blockbuster interview from the killer's father. The seemingly obvious answer of why Solomon was chosen comes from his background. Andrew Solomon's father, Howard Solomon, was the CEO for the pharmaceutical giant Forest Laboratories, which produces the drug Lexapro. Coincidentally, according to Solomon's article, Lexapro was the drug prescribed by Dr. Fox to Adam. The article states that Adam discontinued use of this drug, thus giving the illusion that if only he kept up his dosage, the entire Sandyhook event would have never happened. Now keep in mind, the police report contradicts Solomon's article, as it doesn't mention Lexapro as the drug prescribed to Lanza. Instead, it mentions Celexa. Now shockingly, Celexa is the drug that turned Solomon's Forest Laboratories into a giant. Let's quickly take a look at the police report to cover the specifics. Kathleen Koenig, the nurse specialist working alongside Dr. Paul Fox, gave her testimony to the police. She stated that Celexa was the drug prescribed to Lanza and that Nancy Lanza was, quote, non-compliant, unquote, and giving Adam the prescribed dosage. According to the police report, Koenig attempted to convince her that Celexa was not causing any adverse reactions Adam may be experiencing. And according to Solomon, Koenig was worried about Adam Lanza never taking psychotropics again. Ironically, Andrew Solomon, the man telling the story of Adam through Peter, grew up mentally ill. For years he battled depression, going to extremely bizarre measures as to even travel to foreign lands and try shamanistic tribal blood rituals to cure his illness. To quote Solomon, "So I sat there, naked and completely covered in animal blood, with flies gathering, as they will when you're naked and covered in animal blood, and I drank a Coke." Growing up, Solomon was surrounded by psychotropic drugs. According to his story, he eventually found a way to cure his depression through an undisclosed cocktail of pharmaceuticals. Now, while promoting the drug Celexa, his father would use him as the poster boy of how pharmaceuticals could change one's life. So here we have the Adam Lanza story of a mentally disturbed kid, discontinuing his use of psychotropics, ultimately leading to a mass shooting event. And then we have, on the other side, Andrew Solomon's story of where psychotropics cured a lifelong battle of depression. Is there anybody out there that does not see a clear angle here? Oh, and I forgot to mention that Andrew Solomon is a member of the elitist Council on Foreign Relations, the most influential think tank in the U.S. Even more bizarre is the fact that all of Adam Lanza's alleged psychiatrists were from the Yale Child Study Center, and Dr. Ezra Griffith, a psychiatrist from Yale University, was appointed by Governor Malloy to sit on the Sandyhook Advisory Commission to recommend mental health care in the state. Now, Yale's Child Study Center even testified before the commission. Talk about a major conflict of interest. Mental health, just like any other illness, is a serious problem. There are proper ways to handle it. Pushing pills, psychotropics, and pharmaceuticals in a society that is already overly vaccinated is not one of them. Especially not from a large pharmaceutical corporation like Forest Laboratories, who has several multi-million-dollar lawsuits against them, one of which is for deceptively and unlawfully marketing the adolescent depression drugs Lexapro and Celexa by using misleading drug labels and paying people to endorse them. And it goes without saying that using a fabricated event to push for certain agendas is about as morally unjust as you can get. The preceding documentary was just the tip of the iceberg on the avenue that is Sandyhook. As one delves deep into the endless intersections and rabbit holes of research, one can't help but see a single constant theme. That is the overwhelmingly consistent approach by the authorities to conceal and redact any critical information that might prove or disprove this event.
Is it too much to ask for the Connecticut State Police to release the mass evacuation video that they claim to have on their dash cams? Evidence that shouldn't be harmful or disrespectful to anybody. As we have seen, the police dashcam timeline does not match what is alleged to have occurred. With this knowledge, we can only conclude that the Connecticut State Police have lied.
Or what about information regarding Adam Lanza? As the alleged killer, any release of Lanza's information should not be disrespectful or traumatizing. So where is Lanza's driver's license in the crime scene photos? Why was he allegedly carrying his brother's ID? And why don't we see a copy of that in the photos? If the Ryan Lanza ID story was fabricated, then why was he brought into custody miles away from the crime scene in New Jersey?
There are endless questions that need to be answered. We're not going so far as to ask for potentially gruesome pictures of deceased bodies or pools of blood consistent with a mass shooting, but because the Connecticut State Police has redacted much less traumatizing information, one can't help but ask, do these photos even exist?
Bulldozing the school to the ground instead of making renovations, and a $50 million destruction and rebuilding project in which Consigli Construction was required to sign a gag order only adds even more fuel to the fire. Was the demolition done to conceal the truth of what happened that day?
Whatever the case is, merely gathering, collecting, and knowing all of the anomalies, inconsistencies, and lies within the Sandyhook narrative does us no good until some sort of action takes place, a type of action that may convict possible conspirators.
This is where you step in.
Independent Media Solidarity is the name we chose to represent our loose-knit group because of our shared interests. One of those interests is the purported shooting that took place in Sandyhook, Connecticut. As individuals, we have proposed unique solutions and strategies to resolve this problem. And by resolving the problem, we mean to achieve full disclosure of what took place on that day and of related matters. Full disclosure is the goal. We are confident that what is disclosed will be shocking and of the utmost concern to most Americans. From the antisocial teenager rebelling against their parents to the middle-aged, 5-time juror and veteran of the Gulf War who has a strong sense of patriotism, the stark reality of what their government is capable of will likely cause an unprecedented interest in preventing these things from happening again. And through that shared interest, a national conversation and debate over the issues, we believe a solution will be found. However, there is no one-size-fits-all strategy of achieving that disclosure that would satisfy us all. Thankfully, we all share the common goal of disclosure to build upon. The consensus amongst the group is that the Sandyhook event is largely or entirely fraudulent. To what degree is not certain. The extent of the criminality and how far it reaches into other areas is likewise not certain. However, the group is equally or even more concerned about the greater implications, the ripple effect. You may have seen for yourself how this totally repugnant act has already taken its toll on our society. It's nothing less than ongoing terrorism, but it's a scam, and one that not all of our neighbors can see as clearly as we do. Does it really matter whether the purpose was to usher in gun control measures, or to gain more stringent control over us by widening the net of mental health diagnosis, or to demoralize us so we accept even more unaccountability of government? We think you'll agree that any degree of fraud committed for any purpose is not good for our nation and our world. If you agree, then please help us do what has to be done to achieve the disclosure we seek. But before I explain exactly how you can help, I want to briefly attempt to answer any remaining objections. We don't intend at this point to change the minds of those who accept the official account as legitimate and truthful. Neither do we want to fall into the trap of debating the legitimacy of the event when not having access to the information puts us all at a disadvantage. The point of the presentation you just watched is to sufficiently arm you with the information available and what was found in our investigation. Information that led us to overwhelmingly conclude that the official account is not trustworthy. Some people object to any solution that involves challenging government authority. Even though they may strongly suspect that crimes have occurred, they doubt that the people have the right to accuse their public officials. Or they may simply think that no mechanism exists to force officials to turn over anything that hasn't already been turned over. To these people, we first caution them that it's not uncommon for people to harbor misplaced respect for authority that was never earned in the first place. We've all heard the point being made that politicians lie, and there is exponential growth in examples of public officials shirking their responsibilities and committing crimes ranging from embezzlement to treason. The result of countless debates and determinations throughout history is a general consensus that governments should only be granted as much authority as they were deserving of. Not all people, even those very suspicious of the Sandyhook event, think it warrants an organized response. Some argue that, given all the conflicts and crises taking place here and elsewhere, their time would be better spent in efforts to resolve other problems. Or they doubt that anything that could be achieved would benefit them in any direct way. So it's a value proposition where they don't see much value. To these people, we suggest they consider this. Think of this as a crime of conspiracy and consider the possibility that the conspirators could be convicted, effectively preventing their ability to commit further crimes. It's very hard to gauge, but still very likely, that other crimes, yet to be connected in any way to the Sandy Hook conspirators, have taken place or will take place. Convicting them in this case would likely prevent these future unrelated crimes as well. Lastly, we ask that you not disregard the impact on our society's thinking that could come from exposing this fraud. We don't think it's unreasonable to expect other suspicious events would come under similar scrutiny. How much would you value living in a world where massive institutional fraud had been exposed and would be much more difficult to attempt ever again? Our final point that we hope will answer any objections to joining your neighbors in taking action to resolve this problem is this. Can you sense that something is amiss in your country?
Operative 23, the time is now. This is the voice you have learned to fear.
And other countries as well.
This is the voice you have learned to fear. This is the voice of terror. Again we bring you disaster.
Maybe you sense something far worse is going on, but can't quite pinpoint what it is. We think that whatever the overarching problem that plagues us is, part of that problem is simply secrecy. We lack the information in both national and global affairs to make informed decisions or to simply protect ourselves from harm or misfortune. The appropriate rallying cry might be to wake up and smell the coffee. The media is a powerful but deceptive force that impacts your life. Whether you've been observing this all along or just catching wind of it, the general attitude we have of the press is growing increasingly negative. And the corporate and government-sponsored media outlets, rather than respond to the people's interests, are shockingly making matters worse with more content deemed propaganda and refusing to fulfill our request to inform us. Getting back to that sense that something isn't right, picture that reality as a trajectory, a direction we're going in. And we're staying fixed in that direction like we're riding on a rail, no doubt laid by the powerful forces or institutions that have chosen a destination for us of their choosing. And you can imagine the momentum we as a total society have collectively, especially because so many of us are taking a nap in the back seat and aren't able to help slow our speed or steer us in a direction that better serves us. One way or another, this train has to be stopped or derailed. And if it so happens that secrecy is their greatest means to committing crimes and deceiving us, shouldn't we strive to put an end to this secrecy? To do this means we have to start somewhere. And we believe the place to start is Sandy Hook. One means of taking action is simply promoting this video. As you can see, there are a ton of built-in social media platforms. Another way to share the video is by good old email. But don't stop at Facebook and Twitter. Remember, you can also quickly share the video through Google+, Blogger, Reddit, Tumblr, Pinterest, etc. The next way in which you can take action is by sharing our video and our website by posting one of our ad bombs to your Facebook page, social media feed, or blog. But before we look at those, we need to introduce you to the website. The website can be found at MediaSolidarity.com. It's the official website for our very unofficial group. While we're at the website, let's look at another way in which you can take action. The forum. The forum is intended to be a place for honest, civil discourse and sharing of information in two main areas: the evidence related to the event and disclosure strategies. It's in the disclosure strategies topic where we hope will emerge new and heretofore unconsidered ideas for achieving disclosure of the evidence that remains secret. Of course, anyone insulting others or spreading disinformation will have their accounts terminated. A word of caution to the community of disinformation operatives. Those who are currently members of Independent Media Solidarity and the circles we move in are seasoned researchers or investigators with a great deal of experience handling the efforts of those who seek to disrupt our community. Employing similar tactics here is at least a waste of time and at most ill-advised.